Okay, that's perfectly okay. All right, so we are all here, and our very important city clerk is too. So, so I'm going to call the meeting to order, and this is the regular council meeting for Minnetrista for December 3rd. So first of all, I want to welcome all of you here this evening, and also those that may be watching later on YouTube. Our first order of business, just a reminder, if you have cell phones or electronic devices, please put them on airplane mode, turn them off or on silent so they do not interrupt our proceedings here. And then second, I'd like to ask that you join me in Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So with that, I'm going to start out by making some introductions here. I'm Lisa Whalen, I'm the mayor, and to my left are council members Pam Mortenson, Mike Molitor, John Tschumperlin, Shannon Bruce, and on the end we have our city engineer with WSB, Alyson Fauske, and then we have our city clerk, Kris Linquist, our director of administration, Cassandra Tabor, and also in the audience right behind Cassandra is our public works director, Gary Peters, and then to my right are Mike Barone, our city administrator, Brian Grimm, finance director, David Abel, our community development director. Joining us later on, hopefully, is going to be Ron Batty, our city attorney with Kennedy and Graven. He's at another meeting and hopefully wrapping that up soon and will be joining us. And then our chief of police, Paul Falls, is usually with us and unfortunately is not able to be here at this time. So with that, that concludes our introductions. Next is approval of our agenda. Are there any additions or changes to our agenda? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, motion was made by Mr. Tschumperlin and seconded by Ms. Mortenson. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So our first order is a couple of special presentations. I'm going to hand this over to Brian Grimm. Mr. Grimm.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, and go through this is, I guess, our public comment portion of our meeting on our 2019 final levy and budget. It's a requirement for, I guess, all cities to do each year to give the public a little bit of an overview on the budget and levy for the following year, and sort of recap all the discussions we've been having at the council level, and also everyone's gotten their what used to be called the truth and taxation statements mailed out, so everyone has got those, and it said, you know, our public comment meeting was December 3rd at 7 o'clock tonight, so if anyone's here for that, they'll have a chance to speak after. I'll give a hopefully somewhat brief presentation on the process here. So desired outcome for today's meeting would be action from the council on a final tax levy to adopt here by the end of the month, and those action items are later in the meeting here after the public comment process. Our timeline. So we met in August 6th, August 20th. We met for a couple meetings to review the initial staff budget presentation and the tax levy. And then on September 4th, we came back and had further discussion and then certified a preliminary tax levy, which was basically a 6% increase from the previous year. So now we've went through the process of completing the final budget, and as we've gone through that process, staff is, and you saw in your packet, this was on pages 3 through 49, some of the documents, but there was to either leave the levy at the 6.01% as it was listed above, or to reduce it down to a 4.53% levy increase for 2019, using some projected positive fund balance in 2018. We'll talk about that here in a second. Obviously, every year, some of our main goals and challenges are to ensure the city's financial stability. I think we had a good discussion about that again in the work session. Capital improvement needs, whether it's equipment or infrastructure projects, is always a big item. Making sure we have staffing levels to be able to provide services to provide police, public works. administrative functions for the city. And then one of the biggest ones that have come up in the past several years is our pavement management plan and how to continue funding that and at what level. And that's been I think something that's been a priority as well as a discussion as far as how best to do that. So this was the levy that was referenced, the 6% levy increase, and you can see the different components as far as the general fund levy was going up about 2%. Our debt levies to fulfill our debt requirements was going up about $80,000 there, and that was mainly to do the rest of the Enchanted and Halstead projects, as well as an equipment certificate to fund our equipment. And then lastly, the biggest portion is to do the additional road maintenance levy to fund that, and that was about $125,000 higher. So when you add those all together, you got basically $4.6 million total net levy. As we were finalizing the budget process this year, one of the things we noticed was that our building permits and licenses have been an anomaly this year, probably as far as how much revenue we've gotten there, as far as the number of permits as well as the evaluation of those permits. So you can see when we've projected out our revenue, we're seeing that we think will be about 127,000 higher than what we actually budgeted. So we wanted to see how best to use that, whether it's to put that all to the bottom line or to maybe reduce our levy a little bit, and you'll see that those options here in a second. I just want to give a little history. We have been using the blue line here is our revenues for the 2016-17 actual and 2018-19 budget. You can see those have stayed pretty consistent here in that $4.6 to $4.7 million range, while our expenditures have been in that $4.8 to $5 million range. So we've been budgeting we're basically using some surplus dollars that we've fund balanced in our account right now, and budgeting to use some of that so we don't have a totally balanced budget. What we've seen here in 2018 is those revenues are going to be higher, more about probably that 4.7 to 4.8 area, so that'll help close that gap for 2018. So as a second option basically takes the general fund levy and leaves that flat. So that's a $64,000 reduction from option one. So that gets the total levy here down to about $4,552,000. So when you do that, that's basically about a 4.53% increase over last year. Here's some trend information as far as what our levy's been the past several years. One of the items that we had a lot of discussion about is the reserves and the reserve percentage. We had a surplus in 2015 that we've sort of been putting back into 16 and 17, and then also our budget for 18 and what we're talking about here in 19. You can see the couple of different amounts there, whether it's option one or option two. We're using anywhere from $333,000 to $397,000 of reserves from that revenue expenditure gap. And that would leave us at a projected percentage of about 47%, depending on which of those couple options are used at the end of 2019. And our policy is to go no lower than 40%, and it's good to be in that 40 to 50% range for what state auditor and other recommending bodies state there. This is just our capital improvement fund. Each year it's our actual results and then what we're budgeting. This is for funding such items as our squads, some of our heavy equipment for public works. You can see it's usually in that $300,000 to $500,000 range, so that's just another component that we have to budget for each year, replacing those equipments per our replacement schedules. One thing to point out is that when we've looked back to 2010, basically earlier in the decade here, our tax levy on a $500,000 home, which is roughly around our median home value, is probably $450,000, $460,000. You can see back in 2010, that would have been about $1,353. You can see it went down a few years back in the early 2010s, and now it's came back up a bit, but basically people are still paying less in city taxes in 2019 than they were in 2010, which I don't think a lot of cities can probably say that, so I wanted to at least point that out. Tax impact, so using the two different options, so this is what we certified to the county in September. This is the 6% increase. You can see the average property valuation increase for 2019 is basically about a 5%. That's data we've gotten from the county. And based on that levy increase of 6% with the growth we've had in the city, it gives us a tax rate of about 25.25. If you plug that into the property tax formula, you can see the 2018 tax amount, 2019 tax amount. So the increase for these different properties ranging from $350,000 to $750,000 would be about $27 to $80, and that's an annual difference. So when you take that per month, it's $2 to $6 or so dollars a month or whatever. So to take that second option we talked about, plug in the same type of figures, get a new tax rate of 24.9%, a little lower tax rate. You'd have the 2019 tax amount here, and the annual increase being about $14 to $49, about $1 to $4 a month. Just want to remind everyone, this is using 2018 dollars and using some home values in that median range, but basically the city is just this green section over here, about 23% of your overall tax dollars, about, in this case, $1,157 out of $5,244. The rest is the county, or the county and the school here. So whatever we do with our budget, obviously we don't control when you do that bigger portion or whatever there. So we just can be worried about what that piece of the pie over there. The next slide I just threw in. The first slide was for properties within ISD 277, the Westonka School District. This one's in the Waconia School District. And the only thing probably to note there is I know the school district in Waconia did pass their operating referendum, so that could change what people see in 2019 for their school portion, their taxes within the Waconia School District. Last couple slides here. So some of the assumptions, commitments, items, basically our budget includes, what we've got locked in for our labor contracts. Those are locked in for 2019 and 2020. We do have a equipment certificate that we're using to fund the equipment that's in our 5-year equipment plan for the 2019 items specifically. And then lastly, we talked about the funding of the pavement management plan going from $350,000 to $470,000 to basically try to do more mill and overlay and more type of road improvements to help improve the roads in the city. We talked about the general fund reserve dollars being used to help keep the general fund levy at either a 2% per the one option or a flat or zero increase per the other, while still maintaining the 47% projected fund balance when you look at our expenditures versus how much money we have in our general fund balance. So I guess in summary, we're looking for action from the council on a final tax levy to approve. I think there's been good discussions at council work sessions and meetings throughout the last several months. I think there's been a lot of different good ideas and viewpoints offered as far as all what the council members, good input from everyone. Staff has, proposing an option that reduces the preliminary tax levy down to 4.5% increase, 4.53 from the 6.01 that was in September. As you saw, the roads increase is pretty much the majority of the increase of the additional dollars allocated to roads, and then there's some of the other equipment type items. And the items were included in the packet as far as the action items to discuss later. So I don't know if anyone
All right.
want to turn it over, if there's anyone here to speak from the public, or
I don't think anybody is, but just in case, if anybody has some questions or would like to speak on regards to the budget, is there anybody here this evening for that? Okay. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll be taking up the budget a little later on on our agenda here. So next, we'll move on to our next special presentation, and that's our Excellence in Financial Reporting, or the CAFR award, which stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And Brian, are you
Yeah.
going to be presenting that? And again, congratulations on another job well done to you and your staff.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. And I guess I could have grabbed the plaque off the wall, so maybe just envision or visualize or imagine that I'm holding a plaque or whatever. So, but yeah, this is, I think, we've received the award since 2004. So, we've 14 years we've gotten or something
14.
to that effect.
Yep, in a row. Mhm.
So, yeah, it's one of that. I don't think, I know the majority of Minnesota cities do not get the award. I think whether it's 10, 15% or whatever, go for it and get it. So we've always seen it as a win-win, because it's, obviously something that the city can be proud of, as well as it does have us put additional information in our audit report, an additional 10,
For
20
more
pages
transparency
for more
and stuff.
transparency
Mhm.
as far as it's 10-year trend information and different things that cities that choose not to go for the award don't have to put in their audit. So I think it's good all around. I do want to make sure I don't forget to thank Angie Bowl, who's our associate accountant, and Don Muchko, who's our utility billing specialist. They helped a ton for, with basically getting a lot of stuff ready for the 2017 audit, and made sure, it's a team effort between the three of us to make sure we were able to get everything together, and then have our auditors, review it, and then get the reports out. And so, yeah, just excited to get the award again. I know it's sort of like our, maybe not our Super Bowl, but it's something, pretty pretty
It is.
important
Yeah.
for us to have in the finance department to get this award each year. So, or accept it on behalf of the city, I guess. So.
Well, and thank you. You're deserving of that award, and it is a good award to receive, especially for the city. So, like you said, it does add more transparency to it. So
Yeah, definitely.
thank you for going to that extra trouble. So with that then any other questions or comments from the council? All right. Then we'll move on to persons to be heard. We don't have anybody signed up tonight. So we'll move on to our consent agenda items. Consent agenda items consisting of approval of our closed session meeting minutes from October 15th, 2018, approve our work session meeting minutes from November 13th, 2018. C is approve our regular meeting minutes from November 13th, 2018. D is approving our claims. E is a resolution to approve and finalize the 2018 budgeted transfers. And F is approve and the designated polling places for the 2019 election year. Even though we won't have elections in 2019, we still have to do this. And then G is approve our variance at 7061 Halsted Drive. Any items you wish to remove? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, F, and G as presented?
So moved.
Okay, motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion was made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Mr. Molitor. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. So next we have our public hearings. We have our fee schedule, and and staff is looking to adopt ordinance number 456, adopting the 2019 fee schedule. Is that you, Mr. Grimm?
Yes, yep, Madam Mayor and Council. So what we'll probably, I guess if it works here, I'll overview the packet item, and then I suppose probably open up the public hearing as we
Yep.
need to do because of some of the land use items in there, and then turn it over to council.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, this is on page 109 in the packet. This starts with the memo, and as far as this would be the annual update to the fee schedule by ordinance for 2019. It's really no major changes that are incorporated in the 2019 fee schedule for the 2018 as far as new fees or anything like that. The main changes are probably the water utility rates are going up by the 4%, as we've talked about throughout the budget process, just to pay for some of the infrastructure improvements we've done. The changes in the schedule are highlighted in yellow. There was a small change to the commercial plumbing, which we don't really end up with a lot of commercial. Page 114, we did have the changes that are highlighted there for the engineer rates that we bill out for our land use developments. There, Otherwise, I think as a reference on page 116, the trunk water charge and the water connection fees are going up in correlation with the utility rate fees. And yeah, I think that's the main changes. There was just more a handful of changes that were presented from the 2019, from 2018. So.
And then we talked
the
about the dog license.
sorry,
It's not requiring that.
Yeah,
So-
I guess, thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 119 was, we talked about whether to continue to charge a fee for dog licenses. And I think the consensus of the council was to actually eliminate that fee and do not do that process anymore.
Correct. Yep.
So, correct. Thanks for catching up.
Yeah.
I think that was the last major item that was in there that we talked about.
Yep. So,
We
Any-
wanna- yeah, just
so
open it.
this is, we do have to open it up for a public hearing or public meeting, so I'll open it up for public input. If you wish to make any comments, have some concerns, or would like to address the council on any of these items. I don't think we have anybody here for that, so I will close the public hearing and take it back to council. I know we had a lengthy discussion on this at our work session, a lot of questions, and so what is your pleasure, council? Because we're looking for,
So there'd be two items. It would be the first, I guess, would be to adopt ordinance number 456, which would adopt the 2019 fee schedule. And then if that's the case, it would be approving the public resolution to approve the publication and ordinance 456 by title and summary, because it is a 10-page ordinance.
yeah, we don't want to have to publish the whole thing, so that would just be title and summary, so, okay.
I would move to adopt ordinance 456, adopting the 2019 fee schedule.
With the removal of the dog licenses.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion has been made by Mr. Tschumperlin and seconded by Ms. Mortenson. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, and I'll be voting no on this, and specifically because WSB engineering fees are going up again this year, as they've gone up every year prior, and that's my reason for voting against this. And it's more of a protest vote. I know council has to pass this, to pass these fees on to residents when they have work done, but it's a protest vote because their fees go up every year, and I don't think our residents should have to pay that. The fees are high enough as they are already.
Yeah, and I'm in favor of passing the fee schedule because I certainly don't want to strap the taxpayers in our community with paying for any portion of engineering fees for development or building permits. So those should be borne by the people that are undertaking those projects. So
And unfortunately, this fee structure, these billing rates, are the same fees that the city is going to pay WSB when we ask them to do work on our behalf for doing feasibility studies and things like that. So that's the reason I'm voting no.
Okay. So any other questions or comments? Hearing none then, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Motion- Okay, thank you. Motion passes 4-1, Ms. Bruce dissenting. So next, then a resolution to approve the publication of ordinance number 456 by title and summary.
So moved.
Okay, motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Molitor made a motion. Ms. Mortenson seconded that. Any further questions on this item? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So we'll move on to our business items. And first is our budget approvals. One, to adopt and approve the 2019 tax levy. Mr. Grimm, do you want to add anything to that?
Maybe just a little bit. I guess in this, the actual resolutions are in the packet starting on, I guess, page 121 is the memo. There's basically the two options that staff has outlined as far as whether to leave it at the 6.01% net increase, or I guess the second option that was presented, that is a 4.53% increase. you'll see those laid out as far as on page 122 or I guess 125. I know there's, maybe just turn it over to council as far as where they're at, where they'd like to be, or somewhere in between, or something different, or go from
Right.
there, I guess. So.
Yeah, well, we had, again, at our work session, discussions regarding this, so I know there's a number of different views on the council, and hopefully we can come to some agreement, or at least a majority agreement this evening, but I'll hand it over to the council. Maybe you each would like to make a statement prior to taking a vote. There's been a lot.
I'll start.
Okay.
As in the work session, my opinion was a 3.8 increase would provide most homeowners in Minnetrista with no increase in their property taxes, and it would still provide enough revenue to provide city services to the new properties that have come on board in 2019. So 3.8% is what I was hoping to see. One of the things I don't like about bringing the 6.01 down to 4.53 is to do that, we didn't take anything from the budget. The budget remains the same. The same amount of money is being spent. We're just dipping into our reserves and spending our reserves to make up the difference. So if we had brought down the budget to 4.53 by taking out money from the line items in the budget, that would be one thing. But lowering the tax levy by dipping into our reserve fund, and we're still spending the same amount of money is what I'm saying.
Sure.
And so I'm opposed to both options, the way it's set up. And I would support a 3.8 increase.
Okay. Mr. Tschumperlin?
I appreciate the work that staff's done on trying to move that preliminary number. We all agree that preliminary number was higher than we were comfortable with, and we know that's a number we couldn't go above anyway. I think most of us agree we'd like to keep the projected road budget as it's in the budget, proposed budget. I also have an issue with bringing the reserves down, and while we'll projected to be okay through 2019, the future doesn't look real promising on what the rate might have to be without touching those reserves. But I would, with all of that consideration, I would agree to the 4.5 minimum increase in property taxes as far as each individual resident goes. And again, we do touch reserves a little bit more, but again, I would agree with the 4.5.
Okay. Mr. Molitor?
Kind of echo some of the same concerns. The fact that we are looking to tap the reserves by almost 400,000 is not setting us up for very well for the future. Next 2020, 21. And as a result, I cannot support the 4.53. As much as I'd like to. I think for the extra couple of bucks a year that we're talking about to do the 6.01, I think it sets us up better for the future so that we cannot have increases beyond that in the future. I think just looking at all the needs, and specifically the road needs, that doing it at 4.53, again, if we were at 4.53 because we took some expense out, that might be a different story, but we didn't. We're just getting to that number from 6.01 by tapping into our reserves. And I just don't think when we look at Brian's presentation, the number one goal is financial stability, and that is not what dipping into the reserves to 400,000 achieves. So.
Okay. Ms.
With our building permits and permits in general coming in higher than planned, that did give us a little bit more leeway to drop the tax levy down.
There is a 2% inflation rate, a 2.5% growth rate that we talk about every year. We invested as a city in a very well thought out 5-year pavement management plan. We spent the money on that, and the roads are a problem and we need to address them. So I think we need to go forward with that pavement management plan. Fuel costs continue to go up. Union labor increases are, again, out of our control. The reserve at 46 to 47%. Brian, you had mentioned that a healthy reserve goes between 45 and 50. You said even 40. So I'm comfortable at a 46 to 47. Being a healthy is between 40 and 50. So therefore, I am in favor of the 4.53, and I am very happy that we were able to work hard, thank you guys, to drop it from the preliminary levy of 6.1 to the 4.5.
Okay. So, yeah, what we usually look at is we look at what is our new housing, home value growth. And that was approximately 2.5% this past year. And in addition to that, what is also the rate of inflation? Approximately 2%, which would be, if we want to stay even, if you will, that would bring it to about a 4.5% increase. Having said that, besides looking at that, we also need to look at what are our needs for our city. And one of the biggest needs is roads. I think we would all agree on that. I just think, I don't think any of us here on the council disagrees. We do need to address our road infrastructure, and we have many needs within our city. And so I do think it's important to continue addressing those needs and addressing our road infrastructure. So the biggest impact to the levy and budget this year was our road increase. And I know we had a lot of discussion over that. I think everybody is making some valid points here. Mr. Molitor, I agree. You're saying we have to be careful looking ahead and looking at the long-range plan. I think next year is going to be difficult, and even more difficult than this year, because we're going to have to make some very tough decisions and tough choices, because we do want to keep our fund balance around that. I'd like to see it around the 45% rate. I think that would be healthy, and yet still not be overly healthy, as has been the past for the number of years. It was way up into the 69 percentile, I believe, 62%. That, I think, is a bit high, not necessary. And in order to save our residents, and if you will, sort of repay that, we've been spending down that fund balance to a more acceptable level. So with that, I'm glad that some things in our 2018 budget our revenues came in higher than projected, so that will then enable us to reduce the levy amount for 2019. So with that, I'm in favor, and I'm okay with the 4.53. Having said that, I think next year is going to be a little different picture than this year. So moving on then, we need to adopt and approve the 2019 tax levy. Sounds to me like there's at least a majority in favor of the 4.53% increase in our tax levy. And that would be...
So, Madam Mayor, that would be the option that's on page 125 of the packet. So it would be the gross levy would be $4,678,750, and then the once you subtract out the $126,774 fiscal disparities, you get the net levy. That was that $4,551,000 number that was shown in the presentation.
Right. That would be option number 2. Yeah. So in our packet, it would be option number 2, adopting the final 2018 tax levy collectible in 2019 in the amount of $4,678,750 less the $126,774 in fiscal disparities. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion has been made by Ms. Mortenson and seconded by Mr. Tschumperlin. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, Mr. Molitor and Ms. Bruce, nay. That's 3-2. Okay, so next we have adoption and approve our 2019 budgets and general fund, special revenues, debt service, and CIP funds and enterprise. Mr. Grimm again?
Yep, so Madam Mayor and Council, this is on page 128 of the packet. Basically, this pulls together everything that was in that, the final budget documents on, I think it was pages 3 through 49. So what you'd see is that there was two different summary final budget options in the packet. The first one went along with that higher general fund levy amount at option 1 with the general fund at $4,666,360. That was not what we just adopted here, so it would be an option 2 on page 130 would implement the amount that had the lower general fund levy amount and would have all the different budgets for your general fund, your bond retirement, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, etc. You can see there the total revenue and expenditure amounts that are reflected when for all across all funds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any questions of staff?
So we're being asked to not individually approve these, but collectively approve the funds, right?
In the past, we've usually basically adopted the all funds together as far as taking that detailed information, and then this is the summary information to do that. Correct. And I guess I can, if you want me to, I can highlight a couple of the other major changes. And we're going to be talking about the call on the 2010, the Game Farm Road. That's why there's such a discrepancy there between revenues and expenditures. The enterprise funds, we have some of we talked about in the potential water tower for 2019, obviously being budgeted for. We'll see where that goes or whatever. Trying to think some of the other, just trying to hit some of the high points or whatever.
Sure.
Yep.
I will make, if I may,
Sure, yeah.
a comment on one of the enterprise funds, the water fund. I've noted this before in our work sessions, but I do think it's appropriate here at as we pass our balance here. We are projecting approximately a $2.4 million expenditure on a water tower. As the budget is laid out here, essentially all of that is proposed to be funded via a bond issue. Our water fund has about $2.4 million in it, and while I don't recommend using all of that to fund the water tower, I certainly think $2.4 million of bond issuance is quite excessive.
Yeah, we had talked about that, yeah.
But it's not, and there are no changes reflected in here to show that. And as a result, I'll be withholding my support. I think that number needs to come down dramatically.
Well, I have a question, Mr. Grimm. So the 2.4, that's the budgeted, proposed budget, not necessarily that we would be.
Once we get into what the final project is, obviously that's where we would decide if we're gonna, once what the scope of the project is, $2 million, $2.5 million, $3 million, and then also, I guess, how
much we're going to be bonding for that.
Correct, yeah. Right now, I guess.
The bonding, that element is laid out in here as well. It specifically says $2.4 million.
It does.
I'm not arguing the amount. The amount is what it's going to be. That'll be a different discussion. What I am concerned about is we keep marching to this path of funding all of it with a bond issuance, and I will not support that.
So why is the 2.4 still in here then? What was the rationale behind that?
Well, he has to put a way to fund this. I get
it's
what he's doing in that he has to state, okay, we're going to expend $2.4 million. How are we going to generate the $2.4 million to pay for that? What he's proposing is we issue $2.4 million in bonds. What I'm saying is I'm not at issue with the 2.4. It is what it is. What I'm at issue with is not putting in here specifically that we're going to issue $2.4 million in bonds. That's part of what we've been talking about in the utility discussion about raising fees, because people have been paying this, and as a result, we have $2.4 million in the reserve. Again, I'm not stating we use all of the 2.4, but I certainly don't think it's a stretch to use at least $1 million of that to fund this water tower. And right now, the enterprise fund does not reflect that funding source. It all reflects a bond issuance, and that's the part that I'm opposed to.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because we did talk about that, and we did say if we raise the rates, then we'd like to see that increase go to offsetting some of those costs.
Right.
So,
Correct me if I'm wrong, I still think you can do that, correct?
Yeah, it'd
You don't
be
have to
once
issue
it's-
$2.4 million.
I guess if the council feels comfortable, we could lower that to 1.9, I guess, until the project, it's bid out and stuff, and it comes in. I guess it's sort of bonding / other financing sources, I guess, including up to using fund balance or whatever, so.
Right, I get that, but the way it's laid out, it's not, we're being asked to pass this, and we're being asked to pass it as it's presented. And I'm saying that as it's presented, I'm not comfortable with it. If we want to make a change here tonight and change the wording of how that's funded, then perhaps I would get on board. But as it stands now, I'm not supporting it for that reason.
what page is that on then? What, where it specifically states bonding? I'm sorry. Because if it's simply a word change, bonding / use of fund balance or some fund balance or both, that could easily be accomplished tonight. I'm
Page 10. Yeah, page 10, it has the 2.4 as the revenue source,
Page-
basically matching up page 10 of the packet.
10?
10?
Yep.
110.
Yeah,
Oh, 10.
Oh,
No, 10, yeah.
Okay.
revenue bond. I think the line item
Yeah.
says revenue bond / PFA, because we've used PFA in the past to do some of the water treatment stuff, so. I guess we could change that to say revenue bond / PFA /
Reserve fund.
Reserve
So-
fund, yeah.
Water
Mhm.
reserve.
I just, I don't know if I feel comfortable right now saying 1.7 or just in bonds, or 1.6 or 1.9 or.
I think if you do that, Mayor and Council, I think you've kind of cut your nose off to spite your face. I still think you'll have a chance when we get down to the point of trying to figure out how to finance the water tower to decide how much of reserves you want to use and how much you want to bond.
But I think,
If you leave it
yeah.
at 2.4, because if you include, as Mayor just stated, put / reserve fund, then you've basically said, we're going to get our money for this project from those areas, and those areas now include reserve fund.
well, I think though, we did talk about it, and I think we all kind of agreed, my recollection is that we agreed that if we raised the rates, that we would use some of the reserve funds for part of this project. So I don't think that we would be, we don't have to specify how much of the reserves right now, but I think we can say revenue bond / PFA / reserve funds. I don't know
guess-
that we want to specify the exact amount. We don't know how much it's really going to cost.
Well, I'm not getting comfortable. We've had this discussion quite a bit, but I haven't seen any of the wording changed at all with any numbers. And I'd like to see some kind of a commitment, even if it's just a percentage. Maybe we say, 40%, or whatever the number happens to be, if you don't want to be tight. But I want to see something a little bit more concrete than saying that maybe we will. Now, if you opt to pass this without that, that's on you, I guess, but that's where I'm standing on this. I'm just not comfortable passing along rate increases without some assurance to people that are paying these rate increases that money's going to be used. And I feel much more comfortable about making that statement if I can at least say we've committed to at least 40% or 1 million or whatever the number is, to say, and maybe we'd word it that way, to say at least X percent, meaning that much or more is funded by the reserve. So I want to be able to make a commitment to people to say, yeah, we're raising the water rates, but we're doing at least this much from reserves. Otherwise, I feel like we're kind of dodging the issue.
Mr. Grimm, what do we have in, is it 1.4 million in reserves?
Projected to be
In
2.4.
the fund balance, we have about cash balance 2.4 million.
Are there any recommendations on how those reserves are drawn down like there would be on the general fund?
It's not as standard as like the general fund where it's the 40%, 40 to 50. It a lot of times depends on how much current existing debt you have, what your annual operating expenses, what your projected capital expenditures are. So, I know we looked at this closer with Ellers when we were really gearing up for the water treatment plants, but now that's been, and that was a long, arduous process too. So that was, 5-6 years ago. So to tell you that, 1.5 versus 2 versus a little over 2 million is the exact number. I don't know if I feel comfortable giving you a 100% guarantee right now. I'd say somewhere between where we're at right now and probably up 1.5, 1.8, mid to upper 1 millions is probably fine, but I don't think I'd start dropping it down to $1 million or something, or less than $1 million, because we know it's a fund that has a lot of activity associated with it, especially seeing, you saw some of how our operating expenditures in the fund have skyrocketed with the utilities costs, the electricity, the natural gas associated with running those plants and stuff, so.
But we've seen those expenses come through now. We have some history.
We have a better history now in the last couple of years, yeah.
I'm kind of reluctant. We seem to have no problem just passing an ordinance that took $400,000 out of our general fund levy or reserve, and yet we're real trepid here on doing this. And this is a much more, defined and process. It just seems so contradictory to what we just got done doing.
Do you want it as a separate line item? So you got the bond or revenue bond at X, you would reduce that and then you'd add a sub-line underneath it? Because you want to identify the
Yes.
dollars pertaining to it?
Yes. That way we signal a commitment that we are going to
Yeah.
take some of this from reserve.
I don't have a problem making that commitment, taking some from reserves. I think what staff is saying, and I agree, we have to be careful as to what we say, how much we're going to take from reserves. If you want to say 40%, that would leave about 1.4, 1.5 in the reserves. At
And our annual
40%.
operating expense, refresh my memory, Brian, on this fund. I think it's in here somewhere.
Wait, yeah, that's if I go to page.
Including
For-
debt service and all
Yeah,
of
for
that.
operations, it's about, so you add that. When you add in our with the water treatment plants and our debt service there, you're looking at 1.5 million roughly, if I'm just adding up a few of the subtotals there.
Does that include depreciation?
No.
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 Okay,
That's
so
right.
we're talking 1.5 million approximately annual operating costs. If we took approximately $1 million out of the fund, that would leave 1.5. To use percentages, that's 100%. On general fund, we just agreed to take it down to 45%. So I think even taking $1 million out is still extremely conservative when you use that same type of approach. Right?
It can be, yeah, it's just.
It's
there's a lot-
just the same. It's the same logic. It's the same thing.
Yeah, if
There's just a lot more
40% is about 960,000 out of 2.4.
the only difference
So it's
here
a
is
rough- roughly-
I'm talking about, you do that on your operating expense.
Yeah, I'm saying, whether it's at 960,000 or whether it's $1 million, but, so,
Somewhere in that
Yeah.
ballpark.
The main difference here is you've got locked in. The debt payments you're not going to get away with. We don't
It's
have.
no different than the general fund.
Well, a general fund, if you have to make some adjustments, there's ways.
It's the analogy holds, and you can argue a couple %, but we're talking 100% versus 45. That's a big difference. So I can fudge a little bit on the general fund, but nonetheless, I still think 1.5 is more than adequate as a reserve level, and that would leave $1 million towards funding the water tower.
well, we can, we can designate that, or we can list that as such and see how it comes out too. But only with the water fund and sewer fund, those kind of things, those are, a lot of times, a lot of the money is used, most of the time the money is used for capital improvement projects. So you want to make sure that you have adequate funding in there, not only to pay for your projects, but also to pay your debt service. That's the
Yeah, that was
main-
already in the
that's the main-
1.5.
Yeah, that's the main issue.
So we're still way more than covered.
So, rest of the council, do you feel comfortable saying it would basically just list on page 10, let's see, water fund, it would be
Whatever less, yeah, it'd be the
towards
32.
the end, where it says revenue bond / PFA, then there would be another slash saying, or maybe even another line item saying 1.4 from reserve fund.
One from reserve.
Or one.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
one from
yeah.
reserve fund and then 1.4 revenue bond / PFA. So there'd be one more line item.
Yeah. I was gonna, 2/3, 1/3, 1.6, and 800,000, whatever council feels comfortable with, I guess. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't go much below the 1.5 million.
So that would be, if you go 1.5, it's 900,000.
Well, keep in mind, by the time we actually start paying this, it'll be 2020.
Well.
The reserve will be higher, so you'd still do $1 million and
Yeah.
it'd still be.
Okay,
Well, it could be higher. I
it
mean,
could
a lot of it depends on, right now, we're having a bunch of people hook up to water because we're having all these permits. If that ever, we talked about that potentially cooling off, so there's.
Those are hookup fees, but usage fees won't go down. That's a little different because a permit fee is a one-time fee and then it's gone, which I get. But you have your hookup fee, that's a one-time thing, but you have the ongoing revenue of the water sales. So it's a little bit different.
We're not tied to the numbers anyway,
No.
because that 2.4 is gonna change as
Absolutely.
well.
Yes, an
That's my whole point, is that, we're not tied to it, but at least
It
puts-
indicates.
puts
It's
a
an
line in the
indicator.
sand That says we
Right.
are serious about
You're
doing this.
drawing a line.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're saying, hey, we are serious about, we're
Yep.
not just raising rates just to pad the fund.
Okay.
I'd be fine with the 1.5 and the 900,000 breakdown.
I
agree.
I agree. Let's,
That's fine.
yeah, okay. So we're just going to add that line item. It's going to say revenue bond / PFA. It's going to be 1.5, and then reserve fund balance 900. Okay? All right. Anything else then? Now we have to go back to page
You guys had
130.
130, I think. So that would, I guess, we probably reflect that in that last line item with enterprise. Well, I guess it is, other financing source / use of reserves. I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
depending on, would you want that probably shown as $900,000 less because it would just be coming out of fund balance?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So yeah, we just adopt that resolution there as 11,516, I guess, for the revenues, if I'm doing my math right, 11,516,000. Right?
I'm sorry, what,
He's just taking $1 million.
I'm taking
Or
900,000 off the 12.
the
million.
12,416,
That's
okay.
11.5.
Yeah.
Or,
So give me the number again, Brian.
11,516,755, and then the expenditure number would stay the same, I would assume.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion then, Mr. Molitor?
I'll motion to approve the enterprise funds as presented, or as
With
the-
that change.
With that
Yeah.
change.
As
Be
we
adopting
discussed.
pretty much the total budgets for 2019 for all funds with those changes as
Right.
made.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Okay. Any other is there a second then?
I'll second that.
Okay, so Mr. Molitor made the motion and Ms. Mortenson seconded that. Any further questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, then all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Ms. Bruce dissenting. And then we have adopt and approve our updated financial management plan. Mr. Grimm?
Correct, so this, on page 131 of the packet, it starts, it basically takes, and it had on page 133 and 134, the two different options. So I think the plan we'd be looking at was on page 134. So that has pretty much our general fund, our roads levy, our debt levy, and those things as far as for 2019, and then it projects it for 2020 and 21 to going forward, but obviously those are looked at each year with the annual budget.
Yeah, I was going to ask if, since we look at this every year and we make adjustments and everything, why do we adopt it every year?
Well, I think it's just to, and one of the main reasons of using these tools, all we have to do is adopt an annual budget, legally, but
Right.
the main reason is to try to look ahead, is to sort of see, I think we talked about even in the work session, well, how does 2020 potentially look like? And then we're not making any final decisions on 2020 tonight, but it gives at least sort of a look ahead to some of the potential challenges, opportunities, whatever you want to call it, I guess, going forward. So that's the, there's nothing in there that, this amount that's now at 4.53%, wasn't that last year when you looked at the document? It's a starting point, and it's, for next year's budget discussions and stuff, and it's to try to see potential new bond projects and stuff, and to account for those. So it's trying to be more proactive and look forward, I guess, and be used as a tool by council versus tying anyone's hands, I guess, to summarize, I guess.
Except this now, even this one is going to be changed because of the budget and the levy that was just passed.
That would actually probably change. The next one's the utility financial management plan. This is more related to the tax.
Yeah, but this will still change
Well, I think there was two.
because the ending fund balance is going to change.
Oh, yeah, so there's, some of that as far as correct, yeah.
So do we need to or want to adopt this tonight, or do we update it and then adopt it next time?
Either way is fine. I guess we've made some tweaks and stuff, since even when this was shown in November and stuff, so.
My only concern is I think it would be better if we update it before we pass it, and then we can more accurately see 2020 and 20 and beyond.
Oh, yeah, with some of the building permit.
Because-
That's fine if we wanted to actually, I suppose, table this one, and then also table the utility one. We just made some changes to too, so if you
Yeah,
wanted
maybe-
to, we could bring
Is that
these back
okay?
with
I
it.
think it should be updated before we pass it, considering we just made some changes.
Well, the only thing that changes isn't that already reflected in option 2?
Well, what I'm looking at is going forward in 2020, I'd like to see a little more accurate picture. Also, I'd like to see what it looks like if that fund balance remains at around 40 or 45 versus just saying, okay, it's kind of the same point that you made. Once we approve this and this is now in writing, then it's like, this is what it's going to be. And I really would like to have another look at it before we approve it.
I think, you're looking at option 2 with some modification, and it just points out the concern I had on the levy. So, yeah, that's fine. If we want to update it, you can.
Yeah, I'm fine either way with it. Pretty much it would be updating, and obviously we'd incorporate any changes
Right.
that were made tonight. We could adopt it in direction to make those couple of changes, or if you want me to bring it back, either way is fine, I guess.
Yeah, I'd prefer to do that. So let's bring both the approve the updated financial plan and utility financial plan. Let's bring those back in January then, at our
So
January
we
meeting.
can still approve it tonight and update it?
No,
Right?
we're just going to
No.
bring it back.
This-
Rather-
these plans are sort of additional to what we really need to do for our main
They're not required.
objective we needed to
Right.
do tonight
all the things we need to do.
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the levy and the budget were the two
Yeah.
things we absolutely
Yeah.
needed to do before the end of December or whatever,
Yeah.
so.
These we've
Okay.
historically done just for our council and our
Right.
staff.
Planning and
Yeah.
stuff,
Okay, so are you all in agreement with that? All right.
Yes.
Thank you. So next we'll move on to, this is authorized prepayment and redemption of a portion of the city's general obligation improvement bond, Series 2010A. I don't think we'll be in disagreement on this one.
No, this is, I'm hoping this is a reduction to our debt levy, so I think, and debt levies going forward, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say we might get a 5-0, but no. Yeah, so we've talked about this this summer. Todd Hagan from Ellers came and we had identified there was some, basically prepaid special assessments in different dollars that were available in the fund to pay down about $880,000 of future to call, and then reduce the maturities on for the future.
Yeah, I think it was just paying it down, and then in the future, we're not going to refinance
No.
it or anything. So it's just
Correct.
paying down the balance or the premium, and then going forward, we have less of a
Yeah, I think
payment.
we're able to levy
Yeah.
about $99,000 a year versus we're right now we're at 122
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
So it's that net savings
25,
of
yeah.
23,000,
Okay.
low 20s a year. So we're able to call that and pay for that as of February 1st of 2019. So basically what we're doing here is just the resolution I guess we need to do to send to off to probably the bond or the
Right,
company
to
and
the
stuff, or the
bonding
holders and
holder,
the,
whatever. Okay.
legal bond counsel and stuff
Yeah.
to do this. So
Okay.
so the resolution for that is on page 154 to authorize that. And it's basically providing for the prepayment and redemption of a portion of the city's general obligation improvement bond
Series
2010A. Yep.
All right. Pretty straightforward. Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution as in your packet?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Molitor made that motion and Mr. Tschumperlin seconded. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So next we move on to amend the conservation easements at 7300 Halsted Drive. I believe we have some individuals here for this item, and Mr. Batty, I'm going to hand it over to you first.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Madam Mayor, Council, this property was the subject historically of a couple of lot divisions which resulted in conservation easements. In 1986, that occurred, and the city extracted a conservation easement over the wetlands, which pretty much restricted what you could do with the wetlands, consistent with the sorts of conservation easements that we currently see. You can't put any improvements in the wetlands, you can't put any dirt in, you can't take it out, so on and so forth. In 1995, this property, slightly different configuration, was the subject of another lot split, and again, a conservation or wetland easement was obtained. At that time, I think the intent clearly was to restrict or apply those restrictions to the wetland area, but the document is ambiguous. It could be read as strictly limited to the wetlands areas, or it could be read more broadly to include the entire property. So why do we care? Well, this is the property that's being purchased or is the subject of a purchase agreement between the fee owners and Three Rivers Park District for part of the regional trail. The city a number of years ago agreed in general with the Park District on an alignment of the trail as properties became available. This past summer, the Park District sought and obtained the city's consent for them to purchase this property. And as part of a review of title, both of these issues came out. And so there are two distinct but related issues. One is, as a result of the 1995 document, there is an ambiguity with regard to how much of the property is subject to the restrictions. Again, by looking at the staff report from that time, which is in your packet, I think it's pretty clear that that's the intent was to restrict it to the wetlands. And if you think about it a bit, to apply it to the entire property would affect the taking. So that does not seem to be the intent. The first request then is to change the document to make it clear that the 95 easement, like the 86 easement, applies only to the wetlands. The second piece of this, though, is that the wetlands would, the restrictions from both of those documents would preclude the Park District from putting a trail in the wetlands, because the improvements that would be associated with that would contravene that restriction. So the request is A, to modify the 95 agreement to clarify the intent. And I have to say, that's a document that the city drafted in 95, so I think it's pretty clear that the city caused that problem. That's a title issue that would pertain to anybody who wished to purchase the property. That's the first issue. The second issue, which is more specific to the Park District's proposed use of the property, is to change both documents to say that trail improvements would not be contrary to those easements.
So, Mr. Beatty, but wouldn't the WACA rules apply to these wetlands
Yes,
regardless?
yes.
I mean, so it seems kind of odd that they then put a conservation easement over something that already basically is in conservation.
I can't answer why this was done in 86 or 95.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if this was done in the 60s, then I could see it,
Yes,
because there
yes.
was no WACA rules or Wetland Conservation Act rules back then, but in the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I agree with you. I mean, we have seen a number of city-drafted conservation easements from that era, because they
Yeah.
did predate the Wetland Conservation Act. I don't know why this occurred, and if you buy the argument that the 95 easements were intended to cover exactly the same property as the 86, I can't even explain why there had to be a second easement. But nonetheless, that's the situation we've got. Both of them are recorded, and both of them tumbled out of the closet when
Right.
the purchaser did title work.
Okay. So then just one more question, maybe this is for Three Rivers. So if they put their trail through here, they can put it on upland dry land, but not through wetlands. I mean, correct?
Correct, Madam Mayor,
Okay.
yes. Well, again, if you clarify the 95 document to say that it only applies to wetlands, there are no restrictions on the high ground. And
Right.
so if the trail is put through the high ground, then these documents don't adversely affect them. I'll let Three Rivers speak if they want to about this. I think modifying the document, though, would allow them the flexibility, if they needed to go through some portions of the wetland, to be able to do that.
Okay. If you, Ms. Grimm, no, Grissman,
Madam
sorry.
Mayor, fellow council members, your line of thinking is exactly spot on. Normally, we would be in the same page of the city. We would not be looking to route the regional trail through the wetland at all. We're a natural resource-based agency. We would like to protect that wetland at all costs. Unfortunately, the way that this parcel is, in order to accommodate the regional trail, there is going to be some level of impact in that southeast corner. Where the trail enters the property, it's all wet. It's actually wet all the way to the road edge. So with that 90-degree turn on the road and trying to make sure we have a safe crossing of the road, because the trail will go from the east side to the west side just south of this parcel. We're then going to be entering the parcel or along the parcel where there's a wetland. So we might be able to avoid it through the rest of the parcel, but in that southeast corner, it's no different than your road. There's going to be some level of impact.
And then you'll mitigate those? I'm
Yep,
assuming
so
you'll
the
have to?
WACA rules
Yeah,
would
WACA
apply to
rules,
avoid,
okay.
mitigate, et
Yeah,
cetera.
okay. All right. Anybody have any other questions of the applicant? Or, okay. Thank you, Kelly. Any other questions then of staff? Otherwise, we do have, we're looking for amending the conservation easements at 7300 Halsted Drive as presented in your packet. And let's see, what page would that be on? I'm sorry. It's a lot of pages here. Is it 157?
That's where the staff report begins.
That's a staff report, but modification of wetland conservation easement.
183.
Yeah, thank you. I knew it wasn't at one. Okay, so any other questions? So is there a motion then to approve the modification of the flowage and conservation easement and modification of the wetland conservation easement as presented in your packet?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion or questions?
I will add a discussion element. Just as I want to clarify my upcoming vote, I'll be voting against this. The reason why I'll be voting against this is when the city gave consent to purchase this piece of land, at least it was my understanding that it would be done in a manner such that part of this land, the part that wasn't being used for the trail system, would be reverted back to private use. Subsequent actions have been such that that's not going to be the case. And as a result, I feel that we're now not operating under the same set of circumstances we were when this was agreed to. And as a result, I will not be supporting anything that will help further this sale. This is nothing against the property owners. If this happens not to go through with a sale to Three Rivers and they decide to sell to someone else, I would certainly consider these changes, but I will not support this, as I feel the terms that were consented to originally have changed without our consent.
Okay, right.
And I concur with Mr. Molitor's comments, and I'll be voting against it as well.
So just for clarification, because I know that in the paper there are a couple of articles about the city purchasing these properties, and I think the one in the paper actually listed the one on Little Long Lake, and it really, the heading and all of that sounded like the city was purchasing. The city is not purchasing these properties. The property on Little Long Lake as well as this property are being purchased by Three Rivers Park District. And so a couple of things. Yes, they were, you're correct, Mr. Molitor, they were originally thinking that they could purchase the property and then take out a, if you will, a lot or subdivide a section off of it for the use of a future trail. But because of the manner in which they received the funding for this, that's not possible. And so if they want this, this trail to go through, which the city did approve the trail numerous years ago, if the trail is to go through, they have also said they're only willing to deal with willing sellers. They don't want to do eminent domain, which I applaud them for, and I'm much in favor of. I don't want to have to forego this one, and then later on, if they need to connect that, maybe there's a future board that might decide eminent domain might be necessary, and I certainly don't want that to happen. So I am in favor of this, not only that, but I do believe that this will represent Minnetrista's rural character, that it will help maintain that rural character in perpetuity, because this 50-some acres is never going to be developed. And really that's what we want in Minnetrista. We want open space. We want to preserve our natural amenities and yet still afford our residents the opportunity for recreational activities. So I'm in favor of this. I understand where you're coming from, but I would say I respectfully disagree. So.
And I'd like to say one other thing. When Three Rivers Park District purchases these properties, they come off the city's tax rolls. So we no longer collect property tax from these properties any longer. And there's a principle at stake here. It's not just this one lot. It's the lot on Retreat Drive. And I was under the impression that Three Rivers would only use the portion of these lots that they needed, and that they would return the property back to the city, and we would again be able to get property tax revenue from those properties. When those tax revenues disappear, other residents pick up the slack. They have to replace those property tax revenues, and it causes our tax levy to increase. So that's the reason for my objection.
I understand. And I think both of those two parcels that you referred to, I think the total tax on both of those parcels is like around $4,000, a little over $4,000, considering that we have about 3,800 parcels. I look at that too. I understand it's about $1 per parcel per year. So
Actually,
that's, I'm not.
The
meaning
Retreat
to-
Drive property generated over $16,000 in total property tax. So it doesn't
talking
it doesn't
about
just
Minnetrista,
affect
right.
Minnetrista. It
Right.
affects the county and the school district's
Right.
levy as well.
Right. So anyhow, with that, is there any other comments or questions? Motion is on the table and has been seconded. Then I will call the question. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 3-2. Nays are Mr. Molitor and Ms. Bruce. So thank you very much. You are good to go. So next is approving our city calendar for 2019.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, presented to you in your packet this evening is your proposed 2018 city council meeting calendar. Generally, the council meets every first and third Monday of every month, with the exceptions with the Monday falling on a holiday, which then the meeting will be held that immediately following Tuesday. Typically, the council will only meet once in July and once in December, which that would be July 15th in 2019 and December 2nd in 2019, of course. The Planning Commission meets on the fourth Monday of every month, with the exception of December. The Parks Commission meets on the second Tuesday of every month. Meetings can be canceled if there's nothing on the agenda for that month. Recycling Day this year, in 2019, will be on May 11th, and Trista Day will be held May 18th. I have attached a calendar for your review and a resolution requesting approval of the proposed 2019 City Council meeting calendar.
Which includes Park Commission and Planning Commission as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
A
All right.
couple of typos, I think, on page 197.
Okay, I don't have, just give me one
That's
second.
right after the calendar itself, or right after the under the parks, the list of dates on parks, there's a October 8th of 18. It should be, October 8th of 19.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Tschumperlin, what page are you on?
197.
Thank you.
You're saying planning, it says 3/26/18, and it should say 3/26/19.
He was actually talking about parks, but
Yeah.
that was the other one too.
Oh, okay. There's two then that are 18
Correct.
that should
Yeah,
be
there's one
corrected.
under
Yeah,
planning and one under
Yeah.
parks.
right.
Okay, I'm sorry, and where are you looking?
So under parks,
Mhm.
4 from the bottom of that October 8th date.
Oh, I see,
Should be
yes.
19th, and under planning, the second one, March 26th, should be 19.
Thank you for those corrections. I will make those.
Circuit eyes.
All right.
And is it just out of convenience that we're also listing some 2020 dates?
Yeah.
Well,
those are-
that takes you up through the 2019 year, but if you look, then that will take you into 2020 because that's when those next meetings would take place.
Well, then it should,
So in other words,
Council.
if the due date is December 27th, of course, we're not going to have another meeting in December of 19. That's going to take you into the year 2020.
but then shouldn't it say, under council, the last two, it says 20320. Shouldn't that be 10320?
No, because.
No, because of the way the dates fall, it would not. It would be February 3rd's council meeting because it would go to the planning commission on January 27th.
Okay, see, oh, yeah. Little confusing, okay.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, you're going across, I'm going down, okay. You're saying if it comes to the planning commission on, let's say, February 25th, it'll go to the council on March 4th.
I'm sorry, which day are you looking at?
You're talking about the first drawing.
The very
Yeah.
first one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so if it's the due date of January 25th, then it's gonna go to Parks in February, and it's also gonna go to Planning in February. But Planning is gonna go to that last Monday, so you
Right.
wouldn't see it until
That's
council
what I'm
until
saying.
March.
Then it wouldn't be
correct.
until March, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So with that, is there a motion to accept with those changes from 2018 to 2019, the calendar for 2019?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. So now we'll move on to our professional service agreement for Lift Station 7.
Thank you,
Ms.
Madam Mayor,
Fauske.
members of council. Before you this evening for your consideration is a professional services agreement to prepare plans and specifications for Lift Station 7 force main improvements. This force main is over 40 years old, and the Public Works Department has experienced several repairs have been necessary on this force main. So therefore, there's a budget item of $100,000 in 2019 to repair this force main. In addition to replacement of the force main, because the project corridor along the south end of Shady Lane is very narrow at 33 feet, we anticipate some temporary and or permanent easements may be necessary with the project. This is due to, even though it's a trenchless technology where you dig a pit on each end of the installation throughout the corridor, there might be a few pits. We err on the side of caution because you do need some space to go and dig those pits. So that's been included in the proposal for your consideration this evening. Included in the packet item this evening is a breakdown of the hours spent for each task for your knowledge base, and if you have any questions with regards to how that's laid out, I'd be happy to answer it this evening.
Council, questions?
On the fee schedule, why is Paul Hornby still on here?
With a situation like this, with Paul's historic knowledge of the city, I requested that he assist with this project. If it's the council's desire to see Mr. Hornby removed from proposals, including this one in the future, I can certainly accommodate that.
Well, if he came off of here, would that be a $5,000 reduction in the project, or would it be backfilled with something else?
We would certainly have to allocate those hours to somebody else. The challenge with allocating those hours is the efficiencies that we can realize by utilizing Mr. Hornby with his historic knowledge of the city of Minnetrista. As you can see with, you'd be trading his hours you probably put into me, and I certainly wouldn't have the efficiency that he has in some of these instances.
Yep. And so do we have an idea of what the construction monitoring cost would be on this?
We don't have it at this time. If that's something that the council would like to see in these sorts of proposals in the future, I can certainly bring something like that ahead. We typically look at, for construction observation, as we've unfortunately learned in other circumstances, we tend to look at who's the lowest responsible bidder, and do we need to allocate some additional resources given that contractor. So we could provide a range perhaps for the council's consideration, but at this time we felt it would be premature.
Okay. I think just from my perspective going forward, that information would be very helpful at the time that we award the contract, because if we are looking at the lowest responsible bidder, and I'm just going to make up some numbers here to make my point, if we have a contract that's $75,000 from one bidder and let's say $80,000 from another bidder, but we know that low bidder of $75,000 is going to require an extra $10,000 of construction observation, then they're really not the lowest bid anymore. So I think when we get to that point here, and we see, especially if we see the bids being close, that might be a good piece of information to have because it gives us the overall lowest cost and also might help avoid some of the contract issues that we've had on previous projects.
Certainly, we could look at providing there's value engineering that you can do, pardon me, not value engineering, but best value contract bidding services where you pre-qualify contractors and state out very clearly some criteria on how they are scored. So there are laws that do allow you to do that. And we would certainly have to work with the city attorney's office if that's something that the council would like to look at. In this instance, with the type of contractors that do this sort of work, we don't tend to see the variety of contractors, if you will,
Sure.
that you will for a street contract. So I think we can say with some confidence that we could see some more qualified candidates.
Okay, well, something to consider with
Yeah,
street
we
projects,
should,
so.
but not necessarily, depending on the cost of the project too, because
Right,
it's going to
right.
might add some cost to the project, but we might want to think about that, or at least find out what the additional cost would be for our street projects for 2019 because of all of the issues we had these past 2 years with the contractors that we had. So we'll want to at least find out what additional costs there might be associated with that for our street projects. So, and just have a question. So on your estimated project cost, you have $32,663, but on the resolution it says not to exceed $25,699.
And then, thank you for that clarification. There was the additional $6,964 for the easement review, parcel sketches, and descriptions. So it was split out in the resolution.
Okay, so that's included in the 32,663, which,
That's
okay. All right. Any other questions?
So we have budgeted $100,000 for this project. This is going to take about up to $32,000 of that. So we must have some confidence that construction costs are going to be somewhere under $60,000 because there's going to be construction observation in here. Is that reasonable?
That's certainly something that when it was budgeted, it was taking a look at some of the costs that we were typically seeing. I don't have that
Okay.
number up.
All right.
Any other questions? And this would come out of the sewer fund?
Correct.
And
yes,
it's
it'd be-
budgeted in
this is
our
budgeted in the
CIP?
Sewer cap, yeah.
Yeah.
Capital improvements.
Yep. Yep. Okay. And this is, now, how are you going to be able to do this in conjunction with the 44 project?
As far as
Access and all of
access
that?
through there, I will coordinate that with Mr. Hornby and with Mr. Peters as far as ensuring that we can get our crews through there and schedule a contractor.
What is the estimated time frame to do this work?
We didn't provide an estimated project timeline with this one because the easement could be a process that takes some time.
Okay.
We can certainly get plans and specifications if all things went well and get some bids for the project, in the later part of the spring. But it certainly hinges on what we need for easements and what those negotiations will take for time.
And then I guess another question, specifically on Shady Lane and Margaret Circle and Lakeview, I think it is. They are in dire need of being redone.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't we be doing this in conjunction with a road construction project?
We had that discussion with staff as far as looking at timing this with a street construction project, and if I recall correctly, those streets aren't slated until 2021. So when looking at the force main and the condition that it's in and using a trenchless technology, it was proposed to bring it forward 2 years ahead of a street project and then do the patch for the drilling pits, and then in 2 years you would have your street project to come through and clean up the corridor.
Is that going to cost more?
Directional drilling does cost more than open installation. That being said, with open installation, you do have more boulevard restoration costs, and as I mentioned previously, you have a portion of the corridor that's very narrow at 33 feet.
Right.
So even if you delayed this to a 2021 project to coincide with the street project, you may very well likely be looking at a portion of it being a trenchless technology.
Okay. So you're planning on the whole thing being trenchless?
That's correct.
Okay. So there'd only be minor disturbances then of the falling apart road?
That's correct.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, Council, just to clarify, the Met Council has completed everything on Shady, and also all the pipe work that's necessary between Lakeview and Shady on 44 and through the Shady, or through the park. That was part of this fall. We've worked with Geisinger to get that done. So that part of the project will be done and all closed off as far as the Met Council's hookup and all that. They're completing their work in through the Three Rivers Park District this winter, as well as doing the bridge. But that, as far as Shady and that part of 44 is all complete, so we would have no problem with access through there.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Otherwise, Council, what is your pleasure?
So I guess I do have a question. So there is going to be some disruption, and then 2 years residents will be subjected to more disruption. So I'm still kind of going back to your point, Mayor, about would it make more sense, and this is some of my frustration I've had with our road planning, is this, when we heard putting together a road plan, we should have been considering this, obviously, as part of that, and maybe move this up to earlier, as in 2019. Now we're going to put residents through this twice, make it more expensive.
Well, we talked about doing this area, and I've been mentioning Lakeview, Margaret Circle, Shady Lane, and Loring Drive and Hardscrabble. The reason we're not doing it in 2019 is because of the County Road 44 construction, and it would be almost impossible. I think if you recall, we did talk about that, and we can't do this area in 2019 because of the construction on 44. But my other question, and maybe more urgent, would be to staff about how, if, let's just say we waited until 2020, not 2021, but let's say 2020, then the question is this force main going to hold out? That's the big question, because that's anybody's guess, I know, but it has broken, what, twice or three times? Three times.
Within 3 days.
Well, that was just last winter. I mean,
Right.
There's for sure 8 other breaks that they know of in that piping system through there. So
During this.
Right.
throughout the life of the system. So.
Right. So that's the other thing we have to consider, because if we keep going in and repairing it, that costs money too. So is this a catch-22? We don't do it now, we're going to spend more money on repairs potentially.
Can I play devil's advocate by me?
Yeah.
What happens if the
Please, so we can hear you.
Play
Thank you,
devil's
Mr.
advocate,
Peters.
I'm just looking at it from a maintenance aspect. What if we postpone this to 2021 and then the road project does not happen?
Yeah, I know, I was
So,
thinking more like
that's all
2020.
My concern is now
Yeah.
we've, as Mr. Molitor says, kicked the can down the road, and now we've incurred more costs as to the project. So I'm just playing devil's advocate here from my aspect of
Right.
knowing that the infrastructure is 40 years old, and we do have 2 viable contractors that are out there in Geisinger and in, Minger, out there doing projects right now, who I'm sure would be eager to bid something like that, because it's right in their wheelhouse, and they're doing all the Met Council work right in there. So
Mhm.
I'm just throwing it out there, so in case something happens in the future,
Right.
what happens then?
How long does this project take time-wise?
for a directional drill installation, it's a very quick process if everything goes smoothly. For this amount of work, with the pits that they would have to dig, I would think that the directional drill component, and Mr. Peters can chime in certainly, my guess would be a couple of weeks.
So it's not that long of a time to inconvenience residents.
Yeah,
It's not like a summer.
Yeah.
No, it's not like a road project at all. And as Gary said, we're kind of rolling the dice here.
Yeah.
We've had a number of breaks, but it was last winter that it broke, and then he called me up like 2 days later and said, hey, guess what, this pipe broke. I was like, I thought you told me that already. He said, no, this is a different one, like 2 houses
Right.
down. So
Right. Yeah.
Well, every time there's a break, that's an inconvenience as well, right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
we contract that work out because we don't do that. If it-
Plus, it's more of an expense
Yeah.
because, yeah.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Council, we contract out because that's not our specialty. I mean, we contract a company that has the equipment, has the safety equipment to do it. I mean, it just does not make sense for us who, do it on very rarely. I mean, we do help all, we do supply the trucking to save the money that way. We supply the materials for it, and then we do all the patching, but as far as the actual work itself, we leave it to the guys that do it for a living.
Yeah.
You're talking about the trenchless work.
The trenchless
The
work.
No, just the repair work.
Oh, the repair.
Just the repair itself, We don't have a trench box, which is a mandatory thing to get into a trench when you dig. We don't have that type of equipment to buy. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not just gonna go to the Ready Rents and rent one. So
Right.
it's just much easier to do it that way and not have all the equipment that we need to have it, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Again.
I guess with that said, it probably would be better to do it now versus later. I mean, yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve the professional service agreement for Lift Station 7, force main improvements? That would be CIP 0618.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Mr. Tschumperlin. Any other questions of staff? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So next we move on to our health insurance benefits. Ms. Tabor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Before you in your packet is a request for approval of a health insurance provider for the city employees. It's noted here the recommendation is for the Public Employees Insurance Program, which I'll just refer to as PEEP going forward because it's quite the mouthful. A little bit of history, as you recall, we were prior to 2017 part of LOGIS and considered large group. After 2017, we became a small group under the Affordable Care Act, and we are required to go out to bid for our health insurance benefits yearly. So we did that. We worked with Gallagher Benefit Services. We went out for bid. They helped us create a coverage plan with tiered coverage, as I noted in our packet, and I'll go through that. It was determined that that PEEP would offer comparable coverage to our employees, and it was projected to be a slight decrease over Health Partners, which is what we currently have this year, and we also had in 2017. So the city costs, as I mentioned, were estimated to be a slight decrease, and as we talked about in the work session, at that point, our city staff members had not made their elections, whether they were going to elect employee only or family, which were the 2 options under PEEP. So PEEP eliminated the employee plus 1, whether that's children or spouse. We also received bids from 4 other organizations, so Preferred One, Health Partners, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and Medica. Those were all projected to be significant increases between about 8 and 16% is where those came back. So though this ends up shaking out, as Brian mentioned earlier, is a bit of a net neutral for us, it is not an increase, which was important, obviously, against the 2019 proposed budget. As noted, for the tiered rates, it would leave our employee only option at $900 from a city contribution, monthly, and it would bring our family, which was $1,500, to $1,300. And again, a lot of those employee plus one or singles rolled up to that family coverage.
Just to interject, those dollar amounts are the employer's contribution.
Correct.
So
Yes.
the employees.
Yep. So that's
The
our,
employees or the employer?
The
Those are
employer.
the employer's contribution.
Mhm.
So we went from 1,200 for the plus ones and 15 to just 9 and 13. We lowered the family contribution by the city or the employer to 1,300.
Yes, thank you. And the other piece I was going to add to that as well is that contribution is not for health insurance alone. That is able to be used by employees for dental insurance as well as life insurance options through the city. So we had Gallagher and Peep come out for an open enrollment meeting in November. They reviewed the plan options with our employees, answered any questions that they might have. We also have been in the process of working with the 3 labor unions. They have tentatively agreed to this as something that they're amenable to as coverage for the employees that fall under those labor unions. Something I didn't note in here, but we'll just elaborate on as well, is this is something that we needed to do the open enrollment process for our employees to understand what the costs were going to be. If for some reason the council would prefer to go with a different provider, which as I mentioned would be a city increase, a cost to the city is of an increase, we do have the ability to get out of that original contract that we participated in. That was one of the questions that we had up front, trying to determine what our actual cost through PEEP would be, if that makes sense. So I'm happy to stand for any questions as well.
Okay. I know the Personnel Committee has kind of reviewed this already, so
And
it might be a little clearer to us.
yeah, and just to elaborate just a little bit, PEEP is the state of Minnesota's plan. So there's a lot of state employees in this. There are also a lot of municipal employees in this as well, and we're just one of their newer groups to join. So it's a large number of insurers that they cover. So.
And I think this is something too, if you weren't with us last year or don't recall from last year, we did get a bid from PEEP last year, and it was a significant increase over what we had with Health Partners, and so it wasn't something that was viable in our opinion last year, and as we met with our Personnel Committee.
And every year we go out for bids.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So we might have something different next year. All right, any questions?
If this is the employer cost, which is us, what's the percentage that we're paying for the health care?
Kind of depends on which one, but it's always kind of in that 50 to 75% range. So
Okay.
and that's kind of what we've shot for over the years, which is why we adjusted the one we did. So.
And that's true for both the employee and family plans?
Well, generally, it's a fully fund on the employee.
If it's
Okay,
employee
100%
only.
of employee.
Employee only.
Yeah,
Okay, and then,
but it's, yeah.
okay.
And our family rate last year, the cost to the employee was about $2,100, and the city was doing a contribution for all benefits at the family level at $1,500. So as Mike mentioned, it can really just vary too from year to year what the percentages per grouping
Yeah.
too.
So then one other comment, just so, as Mayor just said, we might have something different next year. We actually won't. This is a 2-year commitment with PEEP, which we're fine with. Their average increases over the last 5 to 10 years has been in the 2 to 4% range. So we don't anticipate a large increase next year, again, because their buying power with the size of their group. So that's a good thing. We only have 19s in front of you for 2 reasons. 1, we don't know the rates for 20, and 2, we're still going to be required through our union contracts to do a reopener like we're doing this year for them. As Ms. Tabor mentioned, we're going to exercise some memorandums of understanding. They've essentially said yes to this. You'll see those probably on your
January 3 consent agenda for approval. We'll have both management and labor have signed off on those, and we'll just need your approval. We're gonna go ahead with the implementation of this insurer starting January 1, as if you have approved it tonight. We just don't have those back, but like I said, they've all agreed essentially to it. We have not heard any backlash on any of these, so I think it's a win for us this year to not really increase our costs. So.
So how is that going to work if we have to get a bid every year according to the ACA, but we're signing a 2-year contract?
We're not signing a contract for 2 years worth of commitment from the.
It's 2 1 year?
Essentially, it's 2 1 years, but, you know, we will look at the dollar amounts for next year, but as I said, their historical rates for the last 5-10 years have been roughly 2 or 3%.
Okay.
And when you balance that off of the 8 to 16, as Ms. Tabor mentioned, that we saw last year, you know, I'd rather have a 0 and a 2 versus an 8 and a 10. from
But
other
that's
vendors.
that's a good clarifying question, though,
Yeah, yeah.
because of our requirements.
So it
together.
could be we request a little bit more, but I can't imagine it's gonna be 8 or 15 or whatever, 8 or 16%. It's gonna be just a couple percent.
Mhm.
And again, we'll just take a look at the dollar amounts and if we don't have to increase it, we won't, the employer contribution.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the 2019 health insurance benefits?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Ms. Bruce made the motion and Ms. Mortenson seconded that. Any further questions?
I just want to state, and I realize that we're operating within the confines of what these providers provided to us, but it is kind of disappointing to see that the employee and spouse option went away, and those people are now forced to pay more.
Right.
But I understand it's the confines of what we're in. Hopefully, at some point down the road, we can bring that option back.
Right.
Agreed.
If we can, we'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. We are going to take about a 5-minute break because we still have one item left, and then we have council and staff reports, and we will have to take a break at 9 o'clock. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break and come right back and finish up our agenda. I think we are all back and reassembled, so we will resume our regular meeting agenda here. Next item on our agenda is, I can find my agenda, is the benefits, leave accrual benefits. So Ms. Tabor or Mr. Barone, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I've got a lengthy PowerPoint, but I thought did the smart thing and sent that along in the packet. Generally, PowerPoints, you know, you're kind of monkeying with them on Monday, which I did, by the way. So there's a few new, different slides in here that were sent to you on Thursday of last week, but they're minimal. So before I start, again, I'd like to kind of just say again, as I did in my staff report, that you know I know this is a hard topic for elected officials to tackle. It's as I mentioned, there's really never a right time when you're kind of giving out extras, so to speak, to our benefits, whether they're paid benefits, leave benefits. It's just been quite a long time since we've looked at these leave benefits, especially for our non-union employees. We have a personnel policy that goes back to '07 that hasn't been updated. You know, one of the things I'd like to do this year is do that, but I've said that every year and for a number of years, and just keeps getting pushed to the back burner. But nonetheless, we'd like to update that. At least we'll update this section if things do get passed. Unions do have a bit of an advantage because whenever a union contract, whether it's a 2-year, 3-year, as we start our negotiation process with them, you know, they'll ask for things. And so being here since 2009 and being part of the labor negotiations all those years, I don't know how many contracts it would be, 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there between these 3 unions. We got requests every year to enhance this or change that. And one of the things we did when we did the union contracts prior to the ones that are enforced this year, starting in 18, is I tried to purposely line them all up to expire at the end of 2017. So we could take this year and look at leave benefits kind of on a global basis. So we wouldn't be renegotiating something about leave benefits with a group that still has a year left to go on their contract, let's say. So that was the idea, was to try to line up all the unit contracts. It's a little bit more work, which is why they were staggered in the past, when you have to do 3 contracts versus 1 or 2 contracts in a given year, because it can be time consuming. But nonetheless, that's why we are here tonight to talk about that. It's been a while, especially, like I said, for non-union. So with this PowerPoint, go on the next one. If you guys want to just, I guess I could change it to. Yeah.
Mr. Bruni, though, the contracts themselves aren't up for renegotiation.
Absolutely
It's just
not.
this one area, the leave benefits.
Yeah. So every year, yes, Mayor, that's a good clarification. So every year, Mayor and Council, as we just did with our health insurance benefits, we place a item in the portion of the contract for all 3 contracts that says, we obviously don't know what the health insurance benefits are going to be for the next calendar year, in this case, 19 and 20, and so we have what's called a reopener. And so we will reopen the contract for that provision only. We also included in all 3 contracts that we would have a reopener for the leave benefits, knowing that we're going to look at them. So they essentially did us a favor, so to speak, and said, we'll live with the leave benefits we have for 1 more year. We won't ask you, because it was obviously their right in our negotiation process to ask for additions to all their leave benefits if they would like, and which they have done. But I asked them, and they agreed to postpone that discussion to a future date. So that's why we are here tonight. So there are 5 leave benefits. We're going to talk about changes to 3 of them overall. 2 of them I wouldn't say major, but there's enough to them where we obviously need to get your approval. And 1 is kind of minor, and 2 that are kind of non-existent as far as changes. So where do we have leave benefits? You see those in our personnel resolution. You also see that in the contract for all 3 labor unions, the 49ers for Public Works, and then the LELS unions, both 116 for the officers and 343 for the supervisors. And then how they are addressed. So any language that is agreed to in a contract overrides any language that is in the personnel policy, because that's an actual contract that we have with them. And then if there's nothing in the contract, which is not the case with leave benefits, but if there's not language in a topic, then it reverts back to the personnel policy, even for those labor union employees. So we'll start out with sick leave. There are 3 aspects to sick leave. 1 is a yearly accrual, and generally that's reported in hours. There's also a maximum accrual that you have, which is just multiplied times 12 for a year, but a total that you say you're going to top out at. And then a severance provision. So most public sector jurisdictions have a 8 hours or 1 day of sick leave per month. So you get 96 hours yearly accrual. And we here at Minnetrista have a maximum accrual of 960 hours, which is 10 years. If you're never sick, you'll have 960. Most people never have that happen, but it can happen. So we cap at 960, and you can never go above that, and you can never carry over more than 960. Even if you've been here 25 years, you can't carry over more than 960. So we're not proposing any changes to either the yearly accrual or the maximum accrual. So what we are proposing, and there's some caveats to this, obviously. Currently for all non-union employees, and then for employees that are in both the police officers and the police supervisors union, this is our severance pay. And severance pay is just a percentage of your unused sick leave that you cash out once you leave employment with the city in good standing. So if you're here 0 to 10 years, you get 0. If you're here 11 to 15, you get 1/4 of that, or 25%, which is 240 of that 960. If you have 960, it's 250 of whatever you have. You have 100, you get 25 hours. 16 to 20, you get 35%, and then 21 plus, you're at 50%. The other union, the Public Works Union, this is their severance pay schedule. I couldn't even tell you when this was adopted. This was here when I got here, and it's probably been a while. They've had labor contracts for a number of years prior to my being here. So theirs is a 0 to 3, they get nothing. And then after 3 years, they get 33% of their sick leave up to a maximum of 160. So if you do the math on 160 times 3, that would be the actual hours, but they would get a third, which would equate to a maximum of 160. Then they would get an additional 80 hours of straight time pay times their current hourly wage, whatever it is when they leave. So that's kind of a big cookie, that 80 hours of pay. So if you're here 4 years, you may not have a lot of sick leave, but you're gonna get 2 weeks of pay walking out the door. And we've seen that happen. But when you go back to ours, 0 to 10, it wouldn't happen currently as it stands. So we've asked the Public Works Union, and we explained to them the new policy, which I'll show you here. So what I'd like to do and have the council adopt is to take the 0 to 10 year level and split it in half. Have a 0 to 5 and a 6 to 10. Because all the other levels are 5-year stratas. And then still have 0 to 5 be 0%. And then as I showed you a couple slides ago, our percentages were 25, 30, and 40. 25, 35, and 50, I'm sorry. And so what I'm doing is making the 6 to 10 to 25%, 11, 15 to 30, 16 to 20 to 40, and 21 plus is 55. Those last three are all 5% higher than before. The new range is the 6 to 10. And you'll see why in a minute or so, why I wanted to split that first two. So this is a comparison of old versus new. And I put in parentheses the maximum hours that you could have, because when you're here 10 years, you could get 960, a fourth of that would be 240, et cetera. To give you some perspective, this is our, by years of service in 5-year service level increments, what we see here at Minnetrista currently for our 37 employees. As you can see, we have nearly half of our employees have been here less than 5 years. And under 20% of our employees have been here beyond 16 years. So it's a relatively young workforce. And we kind of see that here continuing. It probably is going to slide a little bit more towards the middle. But this is a city, as I've mentioned previous times, that it's a great place to work. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of people, because of the size of our city, or roughly 7,200 people, if they really have a desire to move up in their field, whatever it may be, even at the department head level, the way they're going to see growth is to probably leave us and go to a larger city where they can command more pay and benefits there. And we're okay with that. I mean, this is a great place to work, like I said, but we really don't see this changing a heck of a lot. I think we're always going to have kind of a younger workforce compared to other more larger developed cities. And frankly, I'm kind of old school. I'm 60 years old. When I was coming up, it was kind of frowned upon to jump from job to job every few years. That's the norm now. So I still think you're gonna, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just not what I was used to. But I think that's what another factor that could contribute to keeping our workforce relatively young. I thought I'd do some comparisons to some other cities. Here's Wyzetta's, and I put their population in, which is different from the slide you received, just to kind of give you a comparison. Wyzetta's 4,800 roughly population. They've got a pretty robust commercial district, but that's their population of their residents. From 0 to 5, or 720 sick leave hours, they get 25%. 7.5 to 10, they get 60, and then anything over 10, they get 85%. And they can go over 960. So what happens, let's say you're you're in your 10th year of employment, and you have 960, say 15 years of employment, and you have your 960 in your bank. You still can accrue sick leave hours up to the 1056, which is another 1 year's worth of sick leave. But at the end of that calendar year, those 96 hours will go into a post-employment healthcare savings plan, and you go back down to 960. So their cap is 960, but they allow you to grow during that next calendar year. If you only have 1,000 hours, we'll take those 40 hours, drop you to 960, and put those 40 hours in a post-employment healthcare plan. Here's the city of Mound. They don't have a limit on their sick leave accrual. And those are the percentages, 53 after 5 and so on, down to 80 after 25. City of Excelsior, you can accrue 96 hours a year with no limit on the accrual, and when you go to get paid out, you get 50% severance payout for leaving employment anytime after 5 years, but you can get a maximum payout of up to 480 hours, which is half of the 960. So it's 50% of your balance after 5 years. And like I said, ours right now is 0 to 10 is 0. Medina, this is the new slide, I noted it. I talked with Councilmember Bruce, and she said, I'd like to maybe see a couple more cities, and so we threw a few more in. At Medina, their population is not too far behind ours. 0 to 4 years of employment, you can get 33% as a police union, also as an administrative person. Non-police, anything when you get above 4 years, they do have a cap of 960. You still get the 33%, but anything over 960, if you happen to reach that level, will get thrust into a post-employment health care plan. I'm sure the police has to do with the contract. Here's Victoria. They don't really have sick leave and vacation. They have 1 bucket versus the 2 bucket sick leave and vacation, paid time off. When you leave, they give you 80 hours of pay by a direct compensation, and then all the remaining hours go into a 457 plan, which is deferred comp, or an HSA plan. Now, at our city, our deferred compensation plans are all funded by the employee. The employer doesn't contribute anything to that, so this would be a difference there. Threw this one in. It's a larger city. It's obviously a little bit more lucrative. So if you leave Minnetrista, 4 weeks pay, you get 160 hours for that, and then you add a week of pay for every year of employment over 10 years. So you can really get up to a 13-week max, which is 520. You can take that option, or you can take a third of all your sick leave with no max. And I believe that last one is being phased out for new employees hired. It doesn't include new hires after like the last 3 or 4 years or something like that. So eventually everybody will be at that top one.
But that starts at 10 years.
That starts, it starts, if you leave anytime, if you retire, you get 4 weeks of pay, plus you get a week for every year over 10 years.
Oh,
It starts
okay.
at 10 years. Yeah. So if you're a 20-year employee, you get up to 13 weeks. Any questions at all about that? It's a little confusing, but tried to lay it out here. We're going to move on to vacation.
But just any questions? Let's stick to
I'd be happy to.
one at a time, because it's a lot of information.
It's a lot of stuff.
So-
It is a lot of information, a lot of numbers, and a lot of variables,
Absolutely.
because there's different numbers of employees coming on board and how long they've been here and when they're going to leave. And
Right.
and I asked on our phone call this morning if it was possible to take
Snapshot.
a snapshot in time and show all of our employees and the severance pay that they've accrued so far and what that would cost the city, and then replace those numbers with these new numbers and show us the magnitude of this policy change. Because without seeing that, I don't know how big this is.
Okay.
I don't know how it's going to affect our budget.
And when we talked this morning, I said, thank you to Councilmember Bruce, because I thought it was a very pertinent question. So, I cannot give you names of people and their sick leave.
And we don't need that.
I get that. So I'm going to use the 5-year stratus to kind of tell you where we're at. So I will go back to this. Yeah. So for the 0 to 5, it won't matter, because under the old and new, it's still 0. The biggest, obviously, gain are those employees that have been here between 6 and 10 for that group of employees, and there's more of them, about 10% of our workforce. And so that's the biggest gain. And so, trying to find it. There's the average leave balance for anybody that's been here through 10 years. And the range you could have is, at the end of 5 years, you could have up to 480 if you never used any hours of sick leave. And up to 10 years, you could have 960 if you never used any sick leave. The average vacation, or I'm sorry, the average sick leave, it's underneath the word vacation. The average sick leave balance for those X number of employees that I said is roughly 260 hours.
Total.
Total. That's the average for each of those employees. You know, so
Each of them.
For each
of them.
employee.
you know, I've got a total sick leave for all the people, and I average it amongst all. Yeah. For the 11 to 15, again, those folks could have 960 they have about 400 hours on average per employee. For 16 to 20 years, obviously the amount goes up, but we have only 13 5 employees there. It's about 670, I'm rounding. And then those that have been here, there's only a couple of them that have been here 21 plus. And it's not a huge secret here, but you know, these people have all been here, you know, 32 years in one case, 25 years. They're well past 10 years in the 960, so their average is 950. So I mean, you've got 20 and 30-year employees that are in that category. And then the payouts that are kind of corresponding with that, obviously the biggest one would be the top one because of the percentage being at 55 versus 50. That's a difference of about $2,100 per those two employees.
I'm sorry, you just lost me with.
Okay, so if you've got,
And it's getting late.
so if you've got 50% now.
Okay,
for
that
the
was a
highest
different
one,
slide.
It goes to 55 for each of those employees. It's about an extra $2,100, $4,200 total. 21 for each.
And there's two
And there's
in
only
that
two of them.
category. So we're talking 4,100 if they both left in
Correct.
one day.
Yep.
I mean, in
If
one
they
year.
decide to leave, that's what it costs us
Yeah.
extra.
Extra.
With, under the new plan.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
Right.
that extra,
Yeah.
that moving that 5% is about $2,100 per person, $4,200 total. For the next group of 16 to 20-year employees, it's about a $1,200 per person, and there's, what do we say is our? I'm sorry, $1,200. Five. So about 1,200 average.
6,000 roughly.
total.
Roughly 6,000.
It's 5,100, yeah, it's about 6,000 total, yeah. For the next group, it's about $720 difference per employee for those 8 employees. And then, like I said, the largest one would be those 5.
And can you wait for us to do the math? Because I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Or if you've already done it,
I
you
have
can
not.
tell us.
I just got it busted
Is
up
it
on
720
strata.
times? Well,
700
700 times
times
8 is,
56.
yeah, 56, so around 6,000 roughly.
Roughly.
Yep, and then the big one is the 6 to 10, because we have 0 now, and we'd go to 25, and that's about $2,500 per.
So again,
Per
about
10,000.
5,000, yeah. So 5, 6,
Oh, 10,000.
About 10,000.
I'm sorry, 10, 6, and
10, 6, 6,
and
4,200.
40.
So
6, 6,
That's
and
the
10.
assumptions made on the difference between
22,
the two percentages.
24, about 24,000, 25.
Yeah. So it seems like a lot of money, but when you have a payroll, I don't know what our weekly payroll is.
Overtime.
Yeah, no,
It's-
just like a, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, bi-weekly, what
Yeah.
you're looking for, yeah. Like a gross, it's probably like 90,000 or
Yeah.
something.
Times 26 pay periods, so, you know, it's a significant amount of money that's a total, but like I said, not everybody has the max hour. That would be the worst case scenario. This is a snapshot, but the stuff on this is, that's, you know, obviously, worst case scenario, the hours that are listed there.
So 25,000 isn't additional, that's just the total. So based on what they're at this right now compared to the 25, what's the difference?
No,
So
that
that
would,
is-
that is the
that is-
difference, yeah,
So the
yeah.
old one,
Yeah.
the new would be roughly 25,000 more than
Oh,
the
got it, okay.
in total, and that's assuming everybody
Left,
retires
that's
tomorrow.
right, yeah.
So it's not gonna happen.
So I have a question.
Yeah,
If we're adjusting severance and we're talking about wanting to hang on to people, doesn't increasing someone's severance sort of incent them to leave? I mean, what,
No,
how does that entice someone to stay?
well,
And
here's the deal, if the severance stinks, which I think it does for 0 to 10 years of employment, then people end up using sick leave like vacation, because they don't have any way to recoup their sick leave hours. Why save it? If I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna work 5 years, what do I care about saving my sick leave? Because I'm not gonna get anything from it.
Mhm.
So they just say, oh, I'm sick today, and they stay home. Now, we really don't see that, but that's the kind of purpose of incentivizing people to not use their sick leave. The other thing is that we do not offer as a benefit a short-term disability policy. You can buy it on your own through AFLEC, I think we provide that, but the city doesn't provide that. There's a lot of employers, city governments that provide short-term disability. I look at sick leave as our short-term disability. So if you're ever sick, this is a great way, if you save your sick leave hours, to cover your absence. We had Monty Whalen, who retired with 40-plus years of service. By the time he left, he had zippity-doo-dah sick leave, but he wasn't really compromised in his ability to maintain his income, because he was able to draw upon his sick leave to cover when he had these, broken leg injuries and surgeries. I don't know how many surgeries the guy had. So the idea is that we tell people when they come in the orientation, at least I did, I know I asked Cassandra to do that your best bet is to save this for the future, so you can, if something happens to you, you've got a way to cover your income, potentially without buying a short-term disability policy from some vendor. Like I said, we offer a vendor to do it, but I don't promote it to people, I just tell them it's available, but it's up to them.
Right, it's not a city-sponsored
Yeah, we don't
vendor.
pay
They
them.
cannot
Yeah.
use their
Can't use their,
dollars
can't
that are
use their
provided by the
dollars.
city for short-term disability
They're totally on
purchase.
their own for that.
Plus, if they were incentivized to leave, I mean, if they did leave, I would think like, let's say a 21-year employee, they'd be at the top end of the pay scale. You would most likely be replacing them with somebody that's making quite a bit less,
For sure.
too. So it might balance off, too.
Now, it does happen where you had a long-term employee still not sick much, and
Mhm.
they retire in good health. We had Joni leave, I won't
Yes.
give you the dollar amount, but that
Good health.
happens.
Mhm.
Absolutely does happen. But for the most part, people use their sick leave because they're, like my cohorts here and over there, they got small children. I'm past that age, but that's what they're doing, especially if you're childbearing age. You use childbearing age of female, you're going to be using your sick leave to cover your maternity leave, so.
I guess the disability comment is, when you have a disability policy, you have an insurance company that's taking the risk on that. And in this case, it's the taxpayers that are funding it. So that's a big difference between a disability policy and just having
But
having sick leave roll over into a severance and using it for disability purposes. It's not being funded by an insurance company. It's being funded by taxpayers.
well, they earn it though. The employee's earning this time
Right.
off. They're just not able to use it. So you're basically saying, if you're here 0 to 10 years now, just because we gave you sick leave to have, that has no value, sorry. Whereas the short-term disability products that are offered by cities, we don't do that, but we offer an option that's at your cost. I'm talking about short-term disability insurance that's paid for by the employer as an incentive to come work at that city. That doesn't exist here, and that's not reflected obviously in those
Okay,
costs. So,
understood.
yeah.
Mhm.
Any other questions on sick leave? I don't want to short shift it, but vacation. So currently, all union and non-union employees accrue vacation in 5-year blocks of time. So if you're 0 to 5.
Like talking to your,
I'm sorry. From 0 to 5 years, you accrue X number of days or hours of vacation. 6 to 10 is a little higher, and so on. In only our police unions, both police officers and police supervisors, obviously was added at some point in time because it's different than the personnel policy. They negotiated in, I couldn't tell you when, capping said, I'll show you in a second, but it used to be 16 plus. Now it's 16 to 20 and 21 plus. It basically added the top level. So this is what all non-union employees and the public works union employees have for a vacation accrual schedule. They get 2 weeks a year for the first 5 years for each year. During their employment between beginning of 6 and end of 10, they accrue 3 weeks. When they're here between 11 years of service and 15 years of service, they accrue 140 hours or 3.5 weeks of vacation in a calendar year. And then 16 plus, they accrue 4 weeks. But at the end of each calendar year, you can only carry over 120 hours. The reason I have those two words in red, 140 and 160, you see that matches the annual accrual. The personnel policy states that you can carry over whatever you accrue at that hour level.
for that 1 year.
For those 11 to 15 years, if you accrue 100, you can accrue up, your carryover is 140. So we do have a small group of employees that are carrying over 140 from year to year, and then if you're here 16 plus, you can carry over 160. So it's always something. For the unionized police officers, both officers and supervisors, this is their accrual schedule. I just put in the 140, 160 to show you, but they get the same 2, 3, 3.5, 4, and was it 5? 5 weeks of vacation.
On that last category, that's 4.5.
4.5, I'm sorry, it's an extra 20. So from 21 plus, they accrue an extra 20 hours. Doesn't apply to non-union employees because we don't have that level. We'll go up to 160. So surveying our neighboring cities, our vacation carryover max is 120 hours. And like I said, I threw in the non-union 140 for the 10 to 15, 160 for the 16 plus. The Wayzata is 200, Orono's 240, Mount is 240. Medina and Minnetonka both have a sliding scale. Years of service, it starts at 200 and ends at 304, 275, which is why we've had bargaining units ask for raising our vacation carryover in years past. What we're proposing is to move all accrual schedules, vacation accrual schedules, adding in the 21 plus years. Like I said, we've got 2 employees that are in that category now. They can, instead of having 16 plus, it would be 16 to 20 and 21 plus, so we'd be adding that bottom number there, and then moving all the carryovers to 160. Those would be the 2 changes, adding a level, changing the carryover hours from basically 3 weeks to 4
But the
weeks.
annual accrual doesn't change except the 21?
No,
Okay.
the only one is adding that level, but that's still the same as this one.
Yeah.
So, so the annual accrual hours not changing, carryover is what our request is for, going from 120 to 160. Is there any questions on that? Now, by law, when somebody leaves, you have to pay them out all their vacation, whatever they have. That's the law. So that's under the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Questions?
Got a few more, and these get a lot simpler.
Good.
I don't know how they get much harder, but they do get a lot simpler. So we currently have a comp time. If you're eligible for comp time, you can accrue up to 40 in a given year and then carry over 40. We're not asking for any changes at all. This is another bank where we get employee bargaining units asking for increases. Can we have more per year? Can we carry over more per year? And one of the reasons we said no to wanting to change this is because of this. We figured if people were able to carry over more vacation, they would probably quit asking to carry over more comp time. And comp time, again, is one of these things where you're gonna pay it out anyway. So at the end of the year, and since the distribution of the packet, I do have a note, Brian, correct me on this. So if you're a 40 over carryover, if you want to carry over 40 hours, you're a union employee. But non-union employees can't carry over anything. They have to spend it all out. So we have a lot of December dates where people are trying to use up their comp time, not lose it, because there's no value. I know I personally lost it.
But they get it paid out if they don't use
If
it.
they don't use it, they get it paid to them
Right.
in check. So,
Mhm.
but a lot of people like to be gone around the holidays, so you see
Sure.
a lot of absences here. So we're not asking for any changes at all in comp time. Just leave it as is.
All right.
We figure the vacation's enough. Holidays. This is the non-union holiday schedule for public works and for non-union employees. We get Thanksgiving Friday. It's highlighted in blue because you'll see in a second that both our police unions, instead of having the day after Thanksgiving off, Thanksgiving Friday off, they have a floating holiday. Same number of holidays. All four unions, or all four areas, non-union, public works, both police unions have half-day on Christmas Eve, half-day on New Year's Eve. During our last go-around of labor negotiations, I think for sure one, I think maybe two, asked for full days on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. I didn't think that was gonna fly with you guys when I did the contracts. So, and then when we got a little further on in our process, I think for sure one of them changed. Well, what if we took all day of Christmas Eve and just a half a day on New Year's? I thought, well, that tells me something. That tells they value more the Christmas Eve holiday versus the New Year's. So I just showed you, here's what everybody's got 11 or 12. So what I'm asking everybody to do is I'll propose this to all. We're not going to add any more holiday hours. It's still going to remain 11, but we'll combine both the Christmas Eve half day and the New Year's Eve half day. And we'll be off all day on Christmas Eve, but we'll be open on New Year's Eve. Our rationale was we didn't want to ask for additional holiday hours. And typically, like this year's kind of weird, but it kind of fits my argument. We're open on Mondays, Christmas Eve in December. So we'll be open from 8 to noon and close from noon the rest of the day and close all next day. Now that doesn't happen very often, but if we had that all closed, that we close both full days, but we'd be open the following Monday all day instead of half a day. We also feel that you've got people that travel generally for Christmas holiday. That's a lot more of a family thing than New Year's. New Year's, I think all the action's in the evening. People want to go out, they can still go out. If they really want to take a half day, take your own time.
And I think from a work standpoint as well, when it comes to our residents, typically it is very quiet on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
They aren't expecting us to be open at all. Just mentally, that's typically what we get. Whereas New Year's Eve, we do
have some
typically
yearling activity.
see
People come running in here to do
residents
things. What was
coming
it?
in.
Last year was
Last year because of taxes,
well,
probably.
taxes, and
Yeah,
they're trying to
your
call
tax
it the road
questions.
project and
Yeah.
things of that. So
Yep.
seems like a better deal for the public, also for us. We're not adding new holidays, we're just combining 2 half days to 1. And then funeral leave, I only bring it up because we've been requested this particular leave bucket to be added. I've never been in favor of this. Some cities do have a funeral leave quote bucket where there's actual hours there that is given by the employer to use for a funeral. Right now what we do is we have people use their sick leave. And they're given depending on where they work. If you're a non-union employee, it says 4 days of sick leave with supervisor approval. They get 2 more from me if I agree to it. And that sometimes happens when you lose a spouse or a parent or something, and especially if you maybe have to go out of state. For the union, it's 3 and 2. So we don't propose changing any of that. We don't propose adding any funeral leave buckets. It's fine the way it is, I think. I've not had anybody get mad over how come we don't have funeral leave bucket. They wanted it, but they've not come to my office crying, how come we don't have it? No, I just haven't had that.
Any questions? I mean, the funeral leave is, I think, a no-brainer. That's not changing at all.
So
Holidays, any questions on that?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. For of all of it that I saw, I don't have any problems with combining the half days for the vacation. I don't have any problems with the carryover vacation and adding that extra. I don't see that as costing the city much.
Right.
And besides, when you work, you earn vacation, and it's
Right.
it's something that you earn. Sick leave, and I've written personnel policy manuals for companies before. Sick leave isn't something, at least back then, it wasn't something that you earned, it's something that you took when you were sick. And I understand it's combined with severance, and it's sort of like a disability policy, and things have changed, but I think the sick leave severance is going to cost the city more than I'm willing to support. And it's not something, I just don't see it as something that's earned. I think it's people, if they're sick, they should take sick time, and if I don't, it's just never been something that I would consider that you carry over in at all. But, you know, we have a policy and we do that, and that's fine. But increasing it over what it is, I don't think I can support that. But the rest of it, I'm fine with it.
Well, one of the things that the Personnel Committee also looks at is two things, not just retention of good employees, but also are we positioned well in order to attract new employees when we have to hire? And it is becoming more and more difficult in the municipal or government realm to attract new employees. It really is. I keep getting emails, I keep getting information about how it is becoming more and more difficult attracting the younger generation to municipal positions. But and the other thing we have to realize and recognize is it's not the same. It isn't the same as in the other areas, like in the secular world. It's handled differently. I don't know how else to say it.
Private sector.
Private sector, thank you.
We're not a church.
I didn't know we were religious here.
I know. Thank you. It's getting late. But so it is handled different. And so when you first look at this, and when we were looking at it and talking about it, I kind of had the same response. Sick leave? Why do people get paid out their sick leave? But so if you look at it in terms of how are we going to attract new employees when the time comes, and how are we going to retain good employees, and all of that, it might be a small price to pay. We are still well behind, and again, I'm not saying we have to do things like our neighbors just because that's what they do, but if you're looking at being competitive, you do have to look at your benefits package. And so I think if you look at it in terms of, okay, what are we offering and how much is it really going to cost the city? Again, worst case scenario, we were talking sick leave, maybe having to pay out a total. If all those people left in 1 year, hopefully they wouldn't, in 1 year we may have to pay out $24,000, which is not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
No,
So what could it potentially cost the city, on an annual basis? Probably a few $1,000s.
So
And I understand what you're saying, but
when I look at our neighboring cities, no matter who they are, I see us at 0 right now, from 0 to 10. We're trying to make that 0 to 5, but you look at some of these other cities, they're getting something right from the get-go here. This is a 5-year, they're at 50-something. That's beyond our max right now at 21. Excelsior, they get half no matter when they quit, but after 5 years they max out. So everybody's having a sick leave payout. 0 to 4, 0 to 5 years. Something.
Yeah, I was going to say
Medina 0 to 4, 4 plus.
Yeah, the average amongst the cities that we look at, which are all the surrounding cities that you're noting, was just over 3 years. It was like 3.3 years is where their severance process has started.
Count that as a 0. So anytime after you start, you're going to get a percent of your sick leave. So.
Well, and I also believe that when people look for better jobs, they look at the salary that's being offered, they look at vacation and time off and things like that. But I seriously doubt anybody's going to make a decision to go to another city based on sick leave severance.
I think you're correct, but I think this also keeps us out of that happening. And I don't think there's going to be an instance where we're going to have a bunch of people retiring. It's really going to cost us a boatload more money than what we're already paying when somebody leaves. So, you know, Joni's retirement was a substantial amount of money, but she was here 23 years and had all her sick leave. She had all 960, I believe, pretty close. So that's the rare occurrence. It's not the norm. Right now, I've been here 9 years. I'm not doing it because of that, but I'm getting 0.
Well, I'm interested in what others think.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
It's not an, I say, because in the secular world, in the public, in
Private
the
sector,
private
is that what you're
sector, it's not practice. That's what's kind of hard for some of us to digest, because it isn't a practice. Although there are companies out there that offer severance packages when you leave. I mean, and what those are varies greatly.
They're not going to tell me if I ask.
Right.
I guess my overall comments, first of all, I really think you did a good job here, Mike.
Thank you. Well, it was not just me, it was Cassandra. She did
Staff
a
is
lot of
in a
research.
whole,
Yeah.
in whole. I'm really glad to see us move towards something consistent, because I think, obviously it is confusing the way it's set up, just from an administration perspective. So it's really nice to see some consistency across the board and get everyone on the same page. It makes a lot of sense. Seems to be fair. There's a couple things. There's some things about the sick leave, but I know public sector works a little differently, and you see a lot of the headlines. Well, I used to. I don't see it as much anymore, but school districts where superintendents would leave and they'd have 6 months of severance after 5 years or whatever. It would get to be kind of a big thing where
Right.
this.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's what I have. But I'm the only one. I have 6 months spelled out in my contract, but nobody else here has a contract. So
Right. Well,
that's why
but I think that's where it comes into the news a little bit, where you see that. And I think, when you make this many changes, none of us are going to be 100% happy with everything. But I have to look at it overall, because the one thing that I picked out of here, and my comment to you, Mike, is I wasn't real happy about going from 120 carry over to 160. It's not a financial impact. It's more of my theory is coming from the private sector is you get vacation time and you're supposed to use it. That's what vacation's for. And a lot of companies don't allow you to carry over any. Most I've seen is carry over 40. So when I see 160, I'm like, oh, that's not really in the normal what I'm used to seeing. But given that, I think, given everything else, and it's not financial impact, it's not my preference, but I'll go with it just because I think the benefits of the whole package as presented here far outweigh my one beef with this thing. And it's like, fine, it's okay. And I think all the other things that make it simpler, that make it consistent, I can't even imagine the administrative burden of administering all these different things. I just think that it's not a hard dollar savings. We're not going to see it, but I think it's just makes it a whole lot easier and easier to explain to new hires. I like it all the way around. Like I said, there's a couple things I'd personally probably do a little bit differently, but that's fine. I'm good with it as.
Just so you know, your elected officials on the personnel committee did not like what I originally proposed, which is fine. That's their prerogative. That's why we have them on there. I had proposed 200 because it was the low end of this range, and they said, nah, let's go to 160. So that's fine.
And that's why I came to
I have no
after I talked to you and I was concerned with the 160. I'm like, well, in the spirit of compromise and to that, what you've done up to this point, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I agree with what everybody's basically said. Coming from the private sector, the vacation hours, I personally agree with them being lower. I mean, the rest of the cities want to let them accrue those hours, fine, but vacation is to get away from work, to take a break. Whether you love your job or you tell everybody you love your job,
We do every day.
you need to get away. And so most companies, or I shouldn't say most, again, and most of you know I worked for Cargill for lots of years, they brought their hours down over time because the emphasis was on getting people out of the office.
Right.
And of course, from a financial perspective, not carrying these huge accruals
Sure.
somewhere as well. So I don't have a problem with raising, I mean, as long as we're, I mean, you got 240 there in Mound, that's a healthy number. The sick leave, Cargill never had that. It was left up to the discretion of the departments themselves based on the employee. And that I can see being a big headache, and I always had a problem with not having some type of sick leave policy and how you use it. The holidays, putting those two together, that makes absolute sense, and that's what I know a lot of companies have done. That Christmas Eve
Right.
is a much more important day than New Year's Eve.
Right.
So in total, I applaud having this all laid out, and so that everyone knows from the day they're hired what the situation is. And I don't see the accruals and the potential impact on severance as being, just because everybody's not gonna leave the workforce all at once anyway,
We're all
so.
screwed if they do, so.
I don't think that's ever happened unless.
Council may have to come to work.
So I'm comfortable with them.
If I may, one other thing, just to address your concerns, Shannon, on, and I just thought of this sick leave, I know we've all expressed it's a little hard for us to make a comparison, but because a lot of us just don't have it. But what I do note on the, not PTO, the vacation time, is that I think it's 0 to 5 years, it's 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
I know in the private sector, you would never get away with giving 2 weeks of vacation starting out. That just doesn't happen. I mean, if you don't, even college graduates that are hired on usually get 3 weeks, and you kind of go up from there. In some of the other brackets, you could say the same. It probably at the higher end, it gets to be more comparable. But I would kind of view that if we're a little bit more generous on the sick leave, it kind of offsets some of that vacation time. So you can make the argument.
I
it's
think the
probably not one for
vacation
one.
time accrual is significantly less than in the private sector. I know if you were with a company for 20-some years, you would get at least 5, if not 6 weeks. I know a
Right.
lot of people that
That's
get
what
that.
I'm saying, is that
Yeah.
this might be a little light on the vacation, this might be a little heavier on the sick. I think in general, it kind of it works.
Yeah.
You get the more vacation, but you don't necessarily get the more accrual. I
Right,
mean,
right.
So you get more days, but
Yeah.
you're still not gonna be able to add them
Yeah.
and have a
Right.
larger
Larger.
severance.
Right, correct.
So I
Correct.
just wanted to touch on Victoria, only because they have a PTO. PTO is a 1 bucket. Sick leave and vacation are 2 buckets, and that's always the controversy. You should have 1 or 2. Some people like the 1 once they get it, but I'll tell you this, when I was at Eden Prairie, they converted from a 2 bucket to a 1 bucket. And I can't tell you how many people looked at that as a loss, because they're obviously trying to manage the dollars that could happen in the future, just like we're talking about with severance, which is why they went to the 1 bucket. But there's always winners and losers, and you get a lot of heartache from some good number of employees that are pretty diligent about saving their sick leave just so they didn't have short-term disability as a benefit offered by the city, paid for by the city there as well. They just, that was your sick leave was your short-term disability. Whatever, you make sure you save your sick leave hours so in case you get sick, you can use them. But when they converted, it was a ton of heartache, I can tell you that. So we talked about that on the front end, decided, I've been through this once, I don't know if I want to go through it again, because like I said, you got a lot of winners and losers. And you might have a few employees here carpet about it at tonight's meeting if we had gone to a paid time off. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, I'm just saying the conversion is quite a bear, so.
Okay.
I just wanted to pipe in. Vacations, I totally agree. As a matter of fact, in our personnel meeting,
Yep.
I did say vacations is
Take
time to get away. That's why they give you vacation. And, you know, we, in Minnetrista, it is a small business. So when people get all this vacation time, it is a burden on other employees to make up for the hours those people are
It can
gone
be.
as well. So, so I thought the 160 was,
Yep.
compared to the 200 was a
Understandable.
compromise. I like the consistency a lot, and I think not only is it nicer for management and everything, but you know, you get a new employee and they're like, why does that group
Right.
get that, and blah, blah, blah. And the $25,000, big ticket, but that's again, the worst case, that would never happen, so you gotta look at it more in the reality of the world, so.
So I'll say two things. We met with the labor unions after we met with our personnel committee. We kind of told them what may happen, had no idea how the council would react and vote, still don't know, I guess we haven't voted yet. We haven't voted yet. So we told them we would get back to them, but a couple things they did point out that may not change, and this is again, part of the negotiation process. For especially the police officers, they kind of like having the floating holiday, they don't want to change that. They also kind of like having the half day on New Year's Eve, that's kind of a quote, busy day for them. You know, they're out catching drunk people. And a lot of people like doing it, kind of having that last day where they're getting a little holiday pay on New Year's. So they may not ratify, if I had to guess today, they may not ratify that combining the two half days into one, at least in the police unions, but everybody else would be fine with that. So.
Yeah, the same number of hours are paid out.
Yeah.
One of the things that they talked about was that incentivizing police officers to work
Yeah,
holidays that,
They don't mind working on New Year's Eve because
right.
it'll bump in a paycheck if they're scheduled on that day. So.
Okay. All right.
And
So,
then eventually you'll be seeing stuff come back by MOUs and stuff to kind of round out this process in January, once they've approved it, and we'll have you guys certify it.
however, this evening, though, you're looking for approving the revisions to the city's leave benefits program to begin January 1
Correct.
for all non-union and union employees, and then it would then,
Start January 1. So all this
Yeah.
Christmas, New Year's Eve
Yeah.
thing, that doesn't happen.
that
this
doesn't
year.
happen
We're
this
still
year,
fairly
right?
torn, so.
Yeah. Also the accruals don't happen
Right, until
in
next year.
January. They wouldn't be accruing until January of 2020, actually, in the carryovers. So with that, what is your pleasure, council? Do you want to approve the revisions?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion has been made by Mr. Molitor and seconded by Ms. Mortenson. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1 with Bruce dissenting. So that concludes all of our business items, and we'll move on to staff reports.
Okay. More Mike Barone blabbing, sorry. We've got a few things to talk about. I asked you on the council to bring back your calendars so we could potentially have tentative dates or firm better than tentative dates for a couple of items. One was the strategic plan, and the other was to maybe have an open house of some nature for the water tower. So I've got a couple of dates to propose, and hopefully our council members will be able to attend. So I'm looking at, for the strategic plan, the last week in January. And I've got two dates, hopefully that will work for council. So make sure I get the right one. Yeah. So I'm looking at either Tuesday, January 29, or Thursday, January 31st.
I'm
The
good.
Monday night is plan
Yeah.
commission. So.
I'm good for the 29th.
I'm good for the 31st.
Row. Anybody else?
I'm good for I'm good for the 29th, but not for the 31st.
So who said they couldn't do this?
Me, what time would it be?
Well, I think we usually go on like 6. or 5:30, I can't remember. 6, 5:30, about 3 hour thing.
What's your timing?
Oh, I could possibly make it.
Is it a later start better or earlier?
No,
Okay.
later would be a little better, but
6?
6
to
o'clock
9?
would be good.
We get done earlier, great.
Okay.
So we'll go 6 to 9 on Tuesday, January 29th. And we'll notice that as a meeting.
Right. And it'll be held here.
No,
Or
probably
maybe
the old
at our-
PD in
yeah,
the
okay.
large conference
Okay,
room, since that seems to work pretty well.
all right.
And which meeting is that one?
That'll be strategic
That's the
planning.
strategic.
The second one, and I hope I'm not too far ahead of myself because I have not contacted our engineers, SEH. But I'm looking at the week of February 11th, and I'd like to do it either Monday the 11th, it's not a council meeting night, or Thursday the 14th. which is
No,
okay.
that's Valentine's.
Day.
Oh, sorry.
What
Oh,
what
there's
about
nothing
the,
more romantic than a water tower, come on.
We can put a big part on
I
it.
love it.
Now, I don't remember, Lisa, is there a schedule? I know I'm at the end of February.
although that's Park Commission night.
That's the 11th?
No, I'm sorry,
No.
I'm sorry.
14th?
Yeah.
That's a Thursday.
Yeah, yeah.
Park Commission's not.
Yeah, Park Commission is the 12th, I'm thinking, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, okay.
And then actually, as we're talking about those weeks in February, that's typically when we do the state of the city, so that was.
14th or 21st, right?
You
It's
do
like
what?
The state of the city usually happens in February.
Right.
So I was looking at the 12th, which is a Tuesday, or the 21st, which is Thursday, but obviously we don't want to do back-to-back evenings, if not necessary. We'd have to.
Yeah, I thought you had the 14th and 21st, Cassandra.
Oh, I apologize, you're right. The 14th
Yeah,
and the
we
21st.
avoided the 12th because
I
that's a park
apologize.
board night.
Yep,
So we're trying to avoid planning in parks.
yes,
Plus,
thank you.
So I threw out the 11th and the 14th, and Cassandra's probably have to go with the 21st for
Which
the
is-
state of the city if you take that one,
Which is fine.
which is fine. Any objections to either of those, or?
The 11th is fine for an open house. This is open house informational meeting for the water tower. Mhm. Okay,
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
I may be out of town that week.
Okay.
Um,
Do you
I'll
prefer a
I'll
different
have
time?
to check. I don't know.
Okay.
There's some things that are,
So I will call the engineer then and give him a date. I'll give him these two options and we'll find out maybe they'll work.
okay, which two options? You're saying the
I'm saying
11th?
the 11th and the 14th, but Councilmember Bruce is saying she could be gone that whole week.
Okay.
and I would go ahead and schedule it, and if I can't be there, I can't be there. I don't want to.
More importantly is that you're there for the strategic planning.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Need you for
and
that.
I'm fine
yeah.
for that date.
Okay.
So then can we say the 21st for state of the city? Does that work for a majority of people?
That's Pioneer Sarah Creek, probably, potentially, but
okay.
Would be like at 7 o'clock?
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. What time is Pioneer Sarah usually?
6,
Yeah.
depending on the agenda, sometimes we're done by 7.
Come run them in.
I'm running.
So
Okay.
January 29th, February 11th or 14th,
We don't know yet.
and February 14th or 21st. Or you're saying the
21st for the
21st?
Let's
State of
just
the
do the
city.
Yeah,
21st, that
okay.
way we don't leave two up in limbo.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, and then the other item on my list is to talk a little bit about, it'll kind of bleed over into,
Just one more question, I'm sorry. When will we know whether we're going to do the 11th or 14th? Can we
Oh.
find out tomorrow?
I'll try and find out tomorrow. I'm gonna talk with our engineer.
That's that's SEH, yeah.
SEH on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right, thank you.
I'll try to do it this week for sure, but, I mean, we're talking mid-Feb, so I'd have to loosen up your schedule there,
Okay.
Lisa. It's a little too tight if you're worried about it.
Well, yeah, okay, all right.
All right, so the last item on my list is to talk a little bit about the Halsted Drive project. I know Alyson's gonna talk a little bit about it kind of from what's left to do. But just so you know, one of the things we promised at the last meeting was that we were going to meet, which we did on November 26th, I think, if I can read my own writing. We had a conference call. I had Alyson on the conference call, with myself and Brian, and then we had the attorneys, both Ron and Jim Strumman, to talk about all the things related to this crazy Halstead project. And so one of the things we're doing is assembling the information related to future pay vouchers, what they might be, the punch list. We've got some information on retainage and liquidated damages. We're trying to piece together dates, because there's some dates of, substantial completion or end date. And so we're trying to hash all that out. I haven't had a chance to put together the letter from our discussion. That's my job to do, so I'll be doing that. I'll be running it by the attorneys and the engineers. Once we get it to the point where we like it, our next step will be, we can give you a copy of what it is that we're gonna send our friends at RAM. And then we'll send them the letter, and I'm sure that's gonna start the whole, whatever it is that we end up doing. So, I just wanted the council to know, we've been keeping track of all this stuff the engineer has. We've been discussing this, as I said, about last week and in previous meetings we've had with RAM, without RAM. Obviously, we're not happy with how long it took to finish. So, we're obviously going to be trying to make the best case we can in that letter, and we'll see what happens after that, what their reaction will be. I'm sure it's not going to be positive. Probably be pretty firm saying that, but I just want to kind of forewarn the council. A few of you have been on the council when we had our run-in with Knudsen Construction with our water treatment plants. That was a bit of a fiasco. This could be worse. On the front end, I thought, we might come out of this with some money. We ended up paying because of the facts as they come out as you start arguing. We ended up in mediation and talked about that. So I don't want anybody on the council at this point in time to think this is gonna be a money-making venture, but we're obviously gonna try to protect the city's interest as best as we possibly can, and try to make sure that, our needs have been addressed throughout the terms of this contract. So, I just want you to know that we have met. We do have kind of a framework. We'll be putting together a letter, and we'll be sending it out to them in the next week or so to kind of start the ball rolling. It's the right phrase, but that's basically what we're going to be doing to see what happens with them. So,
Some of us have gotten emails from, and specifically Nancy Rigglehoff. Did
Yep.
other council members get that? Has she contacted the city and have?
she has not. I did have a couple of council members say, I got this letter, did you get it? And
I
said, "No."
responded.
I responded, but I couldn't respond with
Yeah.
anything other than
No, and-
validating
and-
her pain.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
kind of where we're at with the homeowners that live on that road, and I completely understand their frustration with it. I don't know if she specifically said it, but I think we've had some people say, are we getting like a rebate or something? That's not gonna happen.
She didn't say.
She,
No,
no,
she didn't,
she
but I
was
think
more
everyone-
complaining about the work, and
Yeah.
that, and she's,
So have we.
and everything was taken care of now.
Yeah.
It's my understanding to her satisfaction, particularly as it pertained to her driveway.
Okay, good. That same day that you sent this email, I got a phone call from someone that lived on the same, within a house or two of hers, and they said the speed signs had been taken down. Did they contact them? Okay.
Those have been put up.
And they got put up? Okay.
They couldn't
Okay.
be put up until after all the work was completed.
The
and
grading work, and
the
they never
grading
finished
work.
it, so we're just out there pounding.
Okay,
inside.
I think it was a misunderstanding. He thought it was gonna take longer than
Well,
that.
everything takes longer with ramps, so.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't Ram.
Oh, I know.
This was Enchanted,
Oh,
and that was
okay.
Valley Paving.
Okay,
That was
Yeah.
two
Well, that
different
took longer
companies,
than it
but
should have,
that
too,
took
but-
longer, yeah.
okay.
Unless we
But,
put the signs in.
Speed signs are up, no parking signs are up. I think they have 10 more,
10 more
Gary
tomorrow.
said 10 more
We got
tomorrow.
40-something in today, and 10 more tomorrow. So we'll keep you apprised of where we're at, but we know we got a letter to write, and I got a letter to write, and have reviewed by our attorneys and our engineers to make sure it's factually correct, and then ship it off, and we'll give you a copy. I'm sure we'll hear more as that goes on, so. Alyson, did you want to touch a little bit on anything related to that, or if you want to talk a little bit about the Enchanted?
Certainly.
So just to give the council a quick update with the remaining items on Halsted, the contractor did go out there and there was some black dirt and seeding that was done that they didn't notify the inspector they were out there. Going through the corridor, we're not currently recommending payment for that. It's clumpy, so we're concerned with, is the seed going to take? What's the final project going to look like? So they did do some work that we have some concerns with quality out there. And then the other remaining work is removing erosion control, which some of it is necessary because the seeding hasn't stabilized, but they're frozen in there right now. It's a lot of erosion control along the corridor. There's some water services to be lowered, and then there's a culvert that's plugged that needs to be jetted. So we have a list. We're at a point now where it's a manageable amount of work, but just wanted to let the council know that there is some work that was completed that we're saying is not satisfactory.
And as we kind of move our way through this, one of the things that we as staff are considering, I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag too much, but we really don't want to have RAM back to finish this up. We want to figure out a different way to do it. Somebody else will find out. We'll find another vendor that maybe instead of paying RAM, we'll pay them, because we had 2 summers of incomplete work essentially. It's like we've had enough. I don't really want to have them back for a 3rd crack at it. So we'll figure out something, but just so you know.
Then just moving over to the Enchanted project, the paving main line was completed the week, it was November 15th, and driveways followed shortly thereafter. And as Mr. Barone mentioned, is that signs are being installed today and tomorrow, so finishing up in that corridor as well.
And I know there were a couple of residents over there concerned about the dip in the driveway. You're saying that's been eliminated, and you've spoken with those residents? And
yes, so there was some immediately after the main line paving, the street was paved. There's a drop off from the road to the driveways until the contractor could bring in the equipment to do the driveway work, and so that the phone call started at that point. I've spoken to everyone, followed up. There was a couple that were concerned with drainage, that it was flat. Followed up with those folks since the paving's complete, and they're satisfied with the work that's been done out there. So.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Any other staff reports?
I don't have anything else, Mayor.
All right, then I'll move along here quickly. Just a few things. November 14th, attended the fire committee meeting, as did Councilmember Bruce. Basically just kind of going over a number of things, and I'll let Councilmember Bruce talk on that. Northwest League, I attended that. Also on the 14th, I was invited to be a guest speaker at the Turtle Creek Homeowners Association annual meeting. And then I also attended the Personnel Committee meeting, and then just recently attended the LMC Metro Regional meeting, and that was very good. There were really some very, very good presentations. Engaging community to imagine the future was one. Virtual community engagement in the budget process, that was another one that was very entertaining and got some good ideas there. And then also another one, afternoon presentation, was moving from conflict to effective governing and problem solving. And so again, just some very good presentations. And also they talked to us about the newly elected officials conference coming up February 1 through 2. If you haven't attended those, highly recommended that you do. Did not hear anything about experienced officials conference yet. And then also just kind of FYI, the annual conference is the 26th to the 28th of June. That's looking out ahead, but that's it.
I attended the Personnel Committee on the 28th, and the Mount West Tonka, my brain is dead. WCC is doing a networking social event the 13th at Surfside. And yes, I'm checking to see if I can attend that.
Attended the LMCD meeting. Main topic of conversation there is the IS program, harvesting specifically. we have a motion to exempt Orono from the harvesting for next year. That motion will be picked up again in this coming meeting to discuss exactly the boundaries of that and what that might look like. And that's kind of been the main topic of the conversation.
15th, I attended Pioneer Sarah Creek. It was a fairly quick meeting. They were just updating on the different projects going on in the other cities, none in ours. And other than there was an update from Bowser on the approach they're going to take to this buffer law that was enacted in 17 and then updated in 18. They're breaking Hennepin County down into 3 sections because every 3 years these facilities have to be randomly selected for oversight, and so they're breaking the county down into 3 sections, so they're just working on one section every year, and we're all in the, Minnetrista's all in the same one, so. And then on the 26th, this past week, a week ago, I was at the Planning Commission. We saw the one item in the consent agenda was pretty straightforward on Halsted. So, and they had a complete group that night. And my understanding, as a side point, the one gentleman who would be cycling off is going to put his application in for possible being reappointed.
Sure.
So we're still just looking for 2 alternates on that commission.
Yeah, there's 2 open alternates.
Yeah, 2 alternates, yeah.
And generally, it's been our practice to reappoint somebody that's volunteered and served.
We can do that,
So,
that's good, I think.
Yeah, right.
That was it.
I attended the Mound Fire Department, or Mound Fire Commission meeting, and I'll just highlight the top things that the Firemen Relief Association was asking for a pension increase, and so we approved a 5% pension increase for the firemen's retirement, and also to extend the pension benefit from 20 years to 30 years. So that was the major topic of discussion. We approved the 2019 budget. It was actually decreased by a little more than 4%, a little over 4%. And we were updated on the grants that have been recently won. They've been doing a really good job writing grants and getting money, and they've got some other ones coming up that they're really hopeful for. But this latest one, they just got a grant for $61,000 to purchase some high-pressure breathing air system for their firemen. So I think that's about it.
Okay. So with that concludes our meeting for this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Mr. Molitor. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0.